And it's time for a live stream. Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. We are just getting started. I'm trying to get started. I have so many things in front of me here that have to be set up that I have not set up yet. So we're getting there. We are making it happen. All right. I need earphones, earplugs, monitors. Where are they? Here they go. Can you tell them behind? Hey, chat room. Hey, everybody. Let's pop out the chat so I can see it properly. There we go. There they are. Thank you for being here. We got a good live stream today. That's not where I wanted that. That's where I wanted it. All Network Plus today. I got a bunch of Network Plus questions for you. Let's see if I can get it on my screen so I can see what's going on. But I'm running behind. Are we recording? We're recording down here. We're recording over there. Everybody looks good for recording. All the cameras, for the moment, are working. I never know sometimes how that's going to go. We're going to get started shortly here. I need to try this camera out for a moment so that I can log into my iPad, which does not have the correct settings. Oh, it's going to rain. It's going to rain. Let's bring up timestamps. We got 6 minutes before we get started. Okay. Carlos in the chat room got your Network Plus. Congratulations. Very, very nice. Okay, let's see where the other end of this wire goes. And now I can hear myself. That's so much better. I hear what you hear, which is even better for all of us. Okay, we got laptop is ready. Let's plug in our phone. Get that going. Howdy, chat room. It's nice to have you here. We've got quite a bit of Network Plus today. First hour will be Network Plus Q&A. I'll ask you questions, and you can answer online. We'll talk about that in a moment. And in the after show, after that, we'll just open up the phone lines. I'll take questions from the chat room. It'll be great. See how that goes. I'm a little bit short of time here, aren't I? I kind of ran in here a little late. It's remarkable what 10 minutes does to a whole schedule. So there you go. In the chat room, hey, I got my 3 CompTIA certs, want to get into IT project management. Any advice? There are some very good project management certifications out there that are focused on project management. It's hard to find a good project manager. It really is. And I think probably because a lot of people have not been specifically trained in project management, it's more like they were doing this thing and then they knew how to get people moving a particular direction. So we put them in charge of the project. That's how project managers sometimes start, which is not necessarily the worst thing in the world, but it certainly is not the best scenario for that. If you've taken the A+ and passed, is there any merit to also getting the Google IT cert as well? Well, the value of any certification is what you do with it. Are people asking you for the Google IT cert? Are employers hiring people that specifically have the Google IT cert? And if they are, that may be motivation enough. Most of the time, we're making those decisions based on a job or a potential job. So we're making decisions about certifications on, can I get a job with this? But of course, that doesn't necessarily have to be a reason you get a certification. Maybe you would just like to learn more about that topic. Maybe you want to be more knowledgeable in that particular area of technology. So take that certification and you will certainly become more knowledgeable. So there's value in any certification, at least at a personal level. But most of us are really trying to get a job or get a better job. So that's where the focus is. So find out in your area. Go look at some of the job postings in your particular geography and see what people are asking for. And that would be a great way to know. Let's see. I need Skype up. Skype's already up. Got it up here. Okay. Is the Google cert redundant if you already have A+? I have no idea. I've not looked at the Google cert recently. I looked a couple of years ago, and I don't know if they changed it, updated it, modified it. I have no idea. So that's be something I could do with myself, something I could spend time on. Have that. Do you need clearance to get into cyber? I'm assuming you mean IT security, because cyber's not a word. It's not a thing. It doesn't exist. Do you need clearance? If you're working for a governmental agency, you probably do. If you are not working for a governmental agency, you probably don't. Because most folks don't, who are not government, they don't care. I walked into hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of companies as an IT security professional, and none of them stopped me from coming in because I didn't have some type of governmental clearance. I don't have a governmental clearance. I never got one. So there you go. Couple of minutes left, a minute and a half. We'll get started here. Can someone with zero knowledge of computer science learn Python? Well, yeah, Python is a kind of an automation scripting type language. It really is not about computer science. And as you'll find out on this particular stream and others that I do, we don't do any computer science here. So if you're here for the computer science, you're in the wrong place. If you are here for the information technology, you're in the right place. And for those of you that aren't familiar with the differences between those two, now's the time you should absolutely have a look at those two areas and understand that they are completely different than each other. So that's where you need to focus. Computer science is one realm of technology. Information technology is another, and maybe they barely touch each other. They pass in the night, sort of. That's it. That's the big differences between those two, and significant differences between those two. If you are really into IT, you wouldn't go out and get a computer science degree. That would make no sense, because then you'd be doing computer science. That's the challenge. It's finding the right thing. And sometimes it is just nomenclature. Sometimes it is an area that we're trying to figure it out. But to answer your question, anybody can learn Python. Python's relatively straightforward. It is a valuable and important skill that really we should all have. You should, at a bare minimum, you should have some skills in Python and or skills in PowerShell. Those are the two. So there you go. That's where I would focus you. Well, it's 12 noon. That one got by me quickly. So let's get started, everybody. I'm running behind. I need to hit the right button there it is, Keynote. Hello, Keynote. And play. That looks good. This looks good. You look good. Let's get this thing started, everybody. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the May 2021 Professor Messer Network Plus Study Group. This is our N10-007 Network Plus Study Group, where in this first hour, I will ask you questions that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. And then in the second hour, we'll open up the phone lines. You can call in or you can put questions in the chat room, which I am monitoring right now. Hello, chat room. Thanks for being here. And we will go through whatever questions you have in the second hour. So there's always something here for everybody. We got plenty of things to go through. For you to be able to participate, if you are here live, you can simply pop open a new browser window and browse to professormesser.com/QA. That is the web page that will present you with a question, our question of the moment, and that you just stay on that page. And I will update the questions as we go by. It's easy to do. There's also an app for this, because there needs to be an app for everything, apparently. This app is the Socrative Student app. Socrative is the service we use to do this. The Socrative Student app, and it will ask you for a room name. That room name is Professor Messer, all one word. So if you do the The link to professormesser.com/QA, you don't need a room name. But if you use the app, you do need the room name. The room name is Professor Messer, PROFESSORMESSER. And if you do all of those things correctly, if everything goes well with that process, you will see a question on your screen right now that says, a network administrator is connecting two devices using twisted pair copper cables transmitting at 10 gigabits per second. Which of the following Ethernet standards would describe this connection? Would it be 10G base T? Would it be 1000 base SX? Would it be 1000 base T? Would it be 100 base TX? Or would it be 1000 base LX? 5 different Ethernet standards. Which ones is this? Well, we'll have to find out in just a moment. Lock in your answer at professormesser.com/QA. As always, please no answers in the chat room, no hints in the chat room. We will come back to that in just a moment. Let's talk about what we're doing today. Thanks for being here. Thanks for tuning in, or thanks for watching live. For those of you that are in the chat room live, hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. We've got all questions today for Network Plus, but of course, during the week, we've always got our videos available. And one interesting thing about my video courses is that every video can be watched for free. There's no registration. There's no paywall. You just go to YouTube and watch it, or you go to professormesser.com and watch it from there. And you can find that at professormesser.com/YouTube. We also have a weekly Network Plus pop quiz question. I post those to Twitter. You can join us on Twitter at professormesser.com/Twitter, and also make the same question available on Instagram, except on Instagram it has a pretty picture to go with it, at professormesser.com/Instagram. Let's talk about the Network Plus. The current Network Plus version is the N10-007. It is an exam that was released on March the 1st of 2018. And you would think now that we're in March, we're in April, now we're in May of 2021, we're still on N10-007. That's because everything really got pushed back. Normally, these are updated about every 3 years. But in this case, we did not get an update in March. And in fact, what we have seen announced by CompTIA is that they are planning, or at least telling us, that September is when you might possibly, at the nearest time, find a particular update to Network Plus. So the point is, if you're studying for Network Plus right now, keep studying what you have. There's absolutely no reason to wait. Please do not wait to get certified. It's an awful idea. You want that certification in your pocket. The retirement date for the N10-007, according to CompTIA and their support line, is June of 2022. So you have more than a year to get through this. This is plenty of time to be able to work on your Network Plus. It's a single exam you have to pass. It's a 90-minute exam. You can get a maximum of 90 questions. The scoring is on a scale from 100 to 900, and you need to score a 720 to pass your Network Plus exam. The exam itself consists of multiple choice questions and performance-based questions, and we'll talk about that in just a bit as we go through this. Of course, all of my videos are available for you to watch for free online, and please go out, watch all of them, watch as much as you need. But there are some people that have said, I'd like MP3 versions to put on my mobile phone. I'd like to have the videos offline, so I'm not using bandwidth on my network connection. Or I want your course notes that come along that. We'll talk about course notes later as well, along with all the other things I create, like my exam hacks ebook and other things. So I bundled all of this together into one thing, and that is my success bundle. You can go to professormesser.com/netsuccess and learn how you can get that or pieces of these things. They are all available on the website. Not only what I think are well-designed study materials created by someone who has done this for a living, but it is also a great way to support what we do here. That's at professormesser.com/netsuccess. You can also watch a video replay of this study group available on my website at professormesser.com and on my YouTube channel. There is also an audio version of this, a podcast flavor of this available at professormesser.com/podcast. It's a great way to do it. There are links there to an RSS feed, so you can put it in your existing podcast listening program, or you can stream it directly from that page. If you do watch the study group afterwards on YouTube, one of the things you'll notice in the video description is that there are all these timestamps. Well, those timestamps don't show up magically. My marketing manager, Lori, has to listen to this whole thing when I'm done and write down the timestamps and what's going on. And she has done this for years, going back to all of our study groups. It's a great way to find what you're looking for. In fact, she's watching this right now on the replay and watching the live chat go by. We talk about it all the time. She watches it afterwards and says, what about this thing that happened? We always have conversations. So hi, Lori. Everybody say hi to Lori. Thank you for doing the timestamps. And of course, they'll be available about a day after this is done. Those timestamps will be on the YouTube. So plenty to do there. Also, the abstract in the chat room, thank you for the $5 donation. The super chat is up and running. It's a great way also to support what we do here. You're in Houston, Texas. My pleasure. More than happy to do this, and I appreciate your support. It does go a long way. It's very motivating to know that you're actually watching and it's something you can use. Let's talk about that question I asked earlier, which was, a network administrator is connecting two devices using twisted pair copper cables transmitting at 10 gigabits per second. Which of the following Ethernet standards would describe this connection? Would it be 10G base T, 1000 base SX, 1000 base T, 100 base TX, or 1000 base LX? All real Ethernet standards, but which ones did you think it was? The first one on the list, 10G base T, is indeed the only standard here that supports 10 gigabit. So by itself, we could have just chosen that one. But 10G base T is also the copper version of this, twisted pair copper. So that is a perfect one to use for this. And of course, 82% of you did choose the answer A. It would not be answer C, 1000 base T. That would be a 1 gigabit connection over twisted pair. And then 100 base TX is the 100 megabit version of that. So the only one here that is 10 gigabits per second, as the question asks, is answer A, 10G base T. You got that one absolutely right. No question. You must have either been very familiar with the answers that were there, but this was our rewind question. This was presented last month. So if you were here last month, you must have remembered what we were talking about last month. That is the right answer, and those are the standards you do need to know for Ethernet. They are listed in the CompTIA exam objectives. Make sure you're familiar with those. Let's do some new questions. Since we're here on the study group, we can do something that's a little different. We have just done this multiple choice-based question, but I would like to ask you a question that is not a multiple choice question. This is something that you will find on the exam. The first handful of questions you get on Network Plus are not multiple choice. This sometimes will confuse people who weren't expecting this, is that the first series of questions are what CompTIA calls performance-based questions. And it's something that is a question that's anything but multiple choice. I guess that's the best way to describe it. It could be a question where they present a scenario on the screen and you have to drag and drop things. They could present you with a list that you have to match. Maybe you have to put things in a particular order. So every month I have a new performance-based question for you. And this is our performance-based question of the month that asks, why I put this into a build, I don't know. But here we go. This asks, put these technologies in order from slowest throughput to fastest throughput. And so I have all of these technologies here. I have OC12, 1000 base T, 802.11 AC, specifically one stream of it at 160 megahertz. I have T3 and 100 base TX. Those 5 technologies, I want to put them in order from slowest throughput to fastest. Now, if you think they are already slowest to fastest, then you can simply put into your Socrative front end at professormesser.com/QA, you would type in ABCDE, and that would be it. You would be done. Now, that is not the right answer. You would get it wrong if you did that. But there is an answer that does put these technologies in order from slowest throughput to fastest. Those technologies, again, OC12, 1000 base T, 802.11 AC with just one stream running at 160 megahertz, T3, and 100 base TX. Those are the 5 technologies. Put them in order from slowest to fastest. So we have to know a few things to be able to do this. This is really pulling from a lot of different parts of the exam objectives. So this is not just one presentation or one set of objectives. This really is pulling from a lot of different areas, which, by the way, you will see on the exam. You will see CompTIA asking questions that combine a lot of these things together and ask you, with all of these now, how do these work together? Or how do they not work together? Or what can you expect when you put these together? And you have to be able to pull from those different areas of the objectives and put them into perspective. So that is the idea here, is doing exactly this. Now, this one is really one-dimensional. These are all 5 different technologies coming from 5 different parts of the exam objectives, but we're really just looking for one thing, which is the throughput, slowest to fastest. That's the key with this, is to be able to put all of these in the proper order. This is not an uncommon style of question on the exam. We do a lot of matching questions. We do some fill in the blanks here. We do a lot there, but this one is definitely one we're putting things in a particular order. And that's another style of question that you might get. Sometimes we do drag and drop. Sometimes we do, we have done some fill in the blanks, and you may find some fill in the blanks on Network Plus, specifically around firewall rules. We've done that one before too. So this is one where just another style. I like to give you different styles to be able to present and see what those are. So let's step through each one of these. Let's put these in order and figure out which one we would put first. So of all these technologies, maybe we can start maybe thinking about which technologies are fastest or slowest. So let's start with what we think would be the slowest one. And on this list, the slowest one would be, by far, the T3. The T3 is a pretty old technology. It's been around, I don't know, forever. It's been around for a very, very, very long time. And in fact, you don't see a lot of lease lines, T3 lease lines being even available to purchase. So that's not something you would find. It's a relatively slow 45 or so, I rounded up a bit, 45 megabits per second. That is certainly a very slow technology. So that's slowest. We're going to put that one at the top. T3 is the first on our list. The second slowest technology, not too far behind it actually, is 100 base TX. That is a 100 megabit per second Ethernet standard. 100 megabits per second is slightly faster than 45 megabits per second. So those two are certainly our 1 and 2 on our list for slowest and then not as slowest. Now let's make a big jump. Let's go to the next one up, which is OC12. OC12 jumps up to 622 megabits per second. Again, rounding up just a little bit. I'm keeping these with at least to the 10th here. So 622 megabits per second, still pretty quick, but there's a reason we don't run OC12 in our own environments, certainly in our own networks, for our connections in a same building to have that. So the OC12 fit the third, but fourth on our list jumps up just a little bit, which is a wireless standard 802.11 AC. And with these wireless standards, of course, they are able to support multiple streams communicating simultaneously, either with MIMO, which is what we saw with 802.11n, or multi-user MIMO, which is what we use with 802.11 AC. So I really did need to tell you what type of 802.11 AC you would be using. So you'd be using a single stream, and of that single stream, you would be using 160 megahertz of the wireless bandwidth, because you can, of course, have 80 megahertz wireless bandwidth. You're using 40 megahertz. I don't think you could do 20. 802.11 AC, I think you have to at least do 80, don't you? So I'm having to do this off the top of my head now. But 160 megahertz, although optional, is optimal on many environments. If you have the bandwidth available, if nobody else is using that bandwidth and you have it available, use all 160 megahertz there, and you can get up to, on a single stream of 802.11ac, you can get up to 867 megabits per second, which means the last one on our list is the only one we haven't selected yet, which was 1000 base T, which is a gigabit Ethernet connection. Probably most Ethernet's connections these days, as we are here in May of 2021. 1000 megabits per second is the same as 1 gigabits per second. And that is our list of technologies in order from slowest to fastest. Now, in the chat room, some of you have even said, oh, I did it in the wrong direction. So you do have to watch for that on your exam. We often want to put the fastest ones at the beginning and then go down to the slowest, but that wasn't the question. In fact, if you go back a year, I update these every year. So if you go back to last May, I think I probably did ask you to put them a different set of standards, but I asked you to put them in order from fastest to slowest. So I mix it up. I make it a little different every time because I think you should be prepared for that. When you go for your exam, it might be different on your exam as well. So just something to keep in mind to be able to have that. If you have another stream, then it is also that other stream is running at 867 megabits per second. If you have a third stream and a fourth stream, they're all running that fast at that particular bandwidth on that Ethernet, wireless Ethernet standard, that Wi-Fi standard. So those are pretty useful to know. So for those of you that were putting these in order, T3 at 45 megabits per second, 100 base TX at 100 megabits per second, OC12 at 622 megabits per second, 802.11ac with one stream running at 160 megahertz is 867 megabits per second, and then Gig Ethernet, 1000 base T, running over twisted pair copper, 1000 megabits per second. That was the key for all 5 of those. Hopefully you got those in the right order. You didn't have to know the speeds. I guess that would have been a bonus if you did, but certainly you would certainly be able to understand more about some of the options that were available, and that might help you as well. In the chat room, Aaron, thank you so much for the £5 donation. Passed your A+ 1002 today. Congratulations. And let us know in the chat room, that is the 1002. Is that your last A+? Did you finally earn? Sounds like you earned the A+ today by passing that. Congratulations on that. Very nice to see. And we also appreciate the £5 donation as well. Thank you. Let's shift now back into performance-based questions. Some of you in the chat room are wondering, do I really need to know this? Do I need to know feeds and speeds? Feeds and speeds is fundamental to networking. That's what we talk about all the time, is feeds and speeds. Let's have a meeting, talk about feeds and speeds. That is sort of a core piece of technology communication, technology conversations with networking. So on your exam objectives, it lists very specifically what technologies you need to know and what those speeds happen to be. And you will run into all kinds of questions in your day-to-day that will be talking about wide area network connections, local area network connections, connections to a data center, fiber, copper, all kinds of different communication. And you have to know those. You have to really be familiar with those. So make sure you are familiar with feeds and speeds, not only because CompTIA asks you about them, but you're going to need to know this day to day for the things that you do. Hopefully they'll help you too. And that was our performance-based question of the month. Let's shift gears back to our multiple choice-based questions where we at least have a chance of getting it right. That's what I think when I'm doing a multiple choice-based question, is at least I've got a chance. I could choose A, B, C, D, or E, and at least maybe I get it right. This question asks, a network engineer would like to query their routers and switches to obtain performance information. Which of the following would be the best way to accomplish this? Would it be SNMP, syslog, SMTP, SIM, or SAS? A network engineer would like to query their routers and switches to obtain performance information. Which of the following would be the best way to accomplish this? Would it be SNMP, syslog, SMTP, SIM, or SAS? It's got to be one of those, right? Do I have that there? We'll find out. Lock in your answer. Go to professormesser.com/QA. Lock in your answer. Please, no answers in the chat room. Please, oh please, no answers in the chat room. That would be important. For those of you asking the chat room about continuing education unit credit, yes, sometime in this first hour of the study group, I will give you information about how you can provide or earn an email from me that verifies that you watch this for a 1 hour webinar category CE. You just keep watching and listening for whenever that happens to be at some random time. We will figure out when that's gonna happen. So we'll know. We'll be able to figure out when that will happen. I will make it very clear, but just keep listening in. It's in this first hour. We'll talk all about it as long as I can remember to do it in the first hour. There's always a caveat, right? And that caveat is me being able to figure out, what do I do? When do I do it? Am I doing it at the right time? Do I have I should probably set an alarm, but then I want it to be random. So that's the key. Let's see how you did with this question, which asked, a network engineer would like to query their routers and switches to obtain performance information. Which of the following would be the best way to accomplish this? Would it be SNMP, syslog, SMTP, SIM, or SAS? It's a lot of S words there. Let's see how you did with this. 56% of you say SNMP, answer A. 29% of you said syslog is what you would use. 11% say SIM, SIEM. You have 4% that said SMTP and 1% that say SAS. I thought SAS was the answer for everything. How is that possible? And yet, only 1%. Well, in this case, the question was very specific in what it was looking for. We were looking for a way to query routers and switches to obtain performance information. And that is the key. The most common and really a very standardized form of obtaining performance information from these infrastructure devices, servers, anything that may be even connected to the network is very commonly through the Simple Network Management Protocol, SNMP. The Simple Network Management Protocol allows you to configure a router, a switch, a server, a firewall, a VPN concentrator, an authentication server, a database server, just almost anything connected to the network, it seems. We'll talk and communicate via SNMP, a very standardized way where you can have a device that is your management station ask the router for specific performance information. For instance, tell me how many bytes have been input into an interface, and that router will send back a message saying, here's exactly how many bytes are going into an interface. And then we can start creating performance information based on this. Not only can we query bytes, we can query errors, we can look at configuration settings, and we can modify those on the device with SNMP as well. But very commonly used for gathering performance details. There's many different SNMP versions. The ones that you'll probably see these days is version 3, because version 3 allows you to have some encryption, some authentication. There's some security behind it. And of course, on our networks these days, we want as much security as we can get. SNMP is a super common way to do this. And in fact, 57% of you, a good number, said that that is exactly the way that you would do it, is using the Simple Network Management Protocol. Now, I'm not surprised that 28% of you chose syslog, because there's obviously routers and switches and servers and other devices that are sending information into a SIM, a security information and event manager. Commonly, we use syslog because it is a standard protocol to take log information from a switch, a router, and those devices and send the log information to a SIM using the syslog protocol. The problem, though, is that logs on a switch, a router, a firewall, a server, and any of these other devices, the logs don't have a lot of performance information inside of them. Logs generally have information about who might be connecting to a device. If it's a firewall, it might have information on what flows were allowed or what flows were blocked. If it's a server, you might have logs that show who authenticated. If it's a switch or a router, you can have logs that show when interfaces are enabled, when interfaces are disabled. but not a lot of performance details. So you'll have a lot of log files, but there won't be any stats in there. You can't generally create a report on utilization by getting log files via syslog, because there's nothing in the logs that have any utilization information. So pretty important to know that particular piece of it. There's a big difference, which is why we use SNMP, because that is a very common and easy way to grab those performance stats. And very often you'll do both. You'll be querying with SNMP, and then you'll also be gathering the logs to your SIM using the syslog protocol. Wow, there's a lot going on there. But it's one of those things that you will absolutely run into this. You will absolutely be using this in your job, in whatever you do with networking and security, is this type of communication. We've already talked about SNMP and syslog in the SIM. SMTP is the simple mail transfer protocol. Now, if you're sending mail between mail servers, that's the protocol that you would use, but it does nothing for obtaining performance information from a device. And lastly, SaaS, software as a service, is not how you would query routers and switches to obtain performance information, unless I specifically spoke about using a cloud-based service to do the queries for me so that I would not have to do that myself. That might be SaaS, but that wasn't the question, was it? There are plenty of services that do that, by the way, where you can just go to a third-party service. You don't have to run your own SNMP server. You don't have to run your own SNMP device or management station. You can simply use one in the cloud that you just log into and it's available to use. Then you might have software as a service. In this particular case, only 1% of you chose that. That, of course, would not be what you would use in this particular case. It would be answer A, the Simple Network Management Protocol, or SNMP. And if you do all these queries, there's the results of my SNMP queries. I went out and grabbed data every 5 minutes, every 2 minutes, every whatever interval you would like to set. And then you can create reports based on this SNMP data because you've simply been querying this information over time. Very, very easy to do it. This looks like it's round trip time. This is not my graph. It's one I grabbed, but that is something you would absolutely create via SNMP. So you can make some really amazing graphs and amazing information that way. So that is our answer, SNMP. Answer A, 58% of you got that one right. Let's do another one. This next question asks, a network administrator would like to block all known vulnerabilities sent into the network from the internet. Which of the following would be the best choice for this requirement? Would it be FDE, FIM, ACL, VLAN, IPS? A network administrator would like to block all known vulnerabilities sent into the network from the internet. Which of the following would be the best choice for this requirement? Would it be FDE, FIM, ACL, VLAN, IPS? If you think you know your answer there, lock it in. There's the URL at the bottom. ProfessorMaster.com/QA will lock that one right in. And figure all 5 of those are real things. So make sure you know what all 5 of those are. At the very least, hopefully you know what the answer is at the very best. That'll make it easy. Very useful. This is one where, and some of you in the chat room are making this comment, and it's a perfectly valid comment, is lots of acronyms. Lots of 3, 4, and 5 letter acronyms in this Network Plus, probably more than A+, probably more than Security Plus in many ways. I think Network Plus probably has the most number of acronyms, probably because we tend to have these technologies in place over a very long period of time. For example, we spoke about T3 earlier. Somewhere in the back of someone's data center, they're probably still running a T3 somewhere. So the T3 is a technology. It's been around for, 30 years, 40 years? It's been around a long time. Could you imagine having an A+ conversation where we're talking about 30-year-old technology? We don't. Same thing for Security Plus. We just don't. So this is pretty interesting that with Network Plus, these technologies tend to stick around for a very long time. Because once you put a network in and it's working, don't touch that. Don't mess with it. Unless there's something really driving you to do that, you generally don't. So we tend to see this accumulation of acronyms as we go through this. So pluses and minuses, we have to know them, and yet there's so much there to know. That's the challenge, to be able to work those things through. And there are some 2-letter acronyms. Are there 1-letter acronyms? I don't know. Which one would that be? I guess it wouldn't. We just have 2-letter acronyms. We do a lot of 2-letter in the chat. Yep, IP, CA, Certificate Authority. We got a lot of 2 letters, but not a lot of 1-letter. So we need to come up with one that's a 1-letter acronym. We'll just all go with it. It'll be the Cher or the Madonna of networking. It'll just be the one thing. Let's see how we did with this question. A network administrator would like to block all known vulnerabilities sent into the network from the internet. Which of the following would be the best choice for this requirement? Would it be FDE, FIM, ACL, VLAN, or IPS? Let's see how you answered this one. 60% of you say it's IPS. 26% of you say it's ACL. You've got now really a 3-way tie for third between VLAN at 6%, FDE at 4%, FIM at 3%. Now, if we went with the majority here, 60%, the 60% that chose IPS are folks that have probably used an IPS before. The intrusion prevention system is pretty useful. The IPSs are well known and designed to look for known vulnerabilities and allow you to decide what to do with those. Do you block them? Do you alert on them? Do you allow them through your network? There's a lot of different things to do. And if you look at an IPS, there will be thousands of rules inside that, because there will be a rule for every single known vulnerability that the IPS knows. And very often in the IPS, you can then go through every single one of them and decide what you would like the disposition of that to be. I think most commonly in IPS, you'll just say block anything bad, and it will block it. They're very good at identifying these, and it's sometimes you'll find an IPS that'll have a false positive, but they're not common to be able to do that. These are very, very useful utilities, very useful tools. That is where pretty much these days all you will find that you'll be implementing is IPS technology that you will be able to block things actively using this functionality. On your exam objectives, you'll notice there's IDS and IPS. You have to know both of those, both host-based and network-based. You have to understand the differences, but technically you're probably not going to run into an IDS these days, although you could absolutely find somebody who has an IPS who is only using it as an IDS. That does happen. And I've designed and implemented many implementations of this type of technology because that's what the customer wanted. They did not want to actively block, nor did they want to be in line. So just because you have the ability to do it doesn't necessarily mean that you will actually use it that way. You may use it in other ways. But I would say the vast majority of customers I worked with plugged in the IPS in line, told it to block everything bad, and they were probably safer and better off because of that. And that's pretty much what I would recommend for any of you as well. Here's a better shot of these rules where you can go through each individual rule and see exactly what you can set for that rule and what it does. Plenty of information to provide. Every IPS is a little bit different. This is probably a Snort IPS rule base. I think that's where I got that from. It was a Snort rule base running on pfSense firewall. I think that's where I got that from. If you wanted to do that yourself, which means IPS, the 61% of you got that one absolutely right. Now, 26% said an ACL. The ACL and having anywhere that you could set any type of control list, either in an operating system, a router, a switch, or anything else. But that access control list allows you to have control over what traffic is able to be allowed or blocked. The problem, though, is an ACL doesn't know what a bad type of traffic is. It doesn't know what a vulnerability is inside of a traffic. Generally, in ACL, you're configuring an IP address range or a set of port numbers that you would allow or block, although technically an ACL is a very broad term that can mean a lot of different things. But whenever you see ACL, at least in the context of networking, we're really talking about configuring a relatively simple filter on a router, on a server, on a firewall. So it would not be ACL in this particular case because we were looking for known vulnerabilities, and ACLs, the way we implement ACLs generally, is not something we would use for that. And this did ask for the best choice, and certainly an IPS would be a much better choice than a very generic ACL. We also have VLAN at 6%. VLANs are a way to separate effectively broadcast domains. They have nothing to do with blocking known vulnerabilities. 4% of you said full disk encryption, FDE, or at least you think you chose FDE as full disk encryption. And although full disk encryption keeps your data safe on a storage drive, it does not block known vulnerabilities coming from the internet. And lastly, a FEM, being able to identify anything relating to file management or file changes is the FEM, and that is 3%. Obviously not anything that will block known vulnerabilities either. The best choice, the only choice, the one that makes the most sense, IPS, answer E, 61% of you got that one absolutely right. Let's do another one. Let's keep this going. I'm talking too much today. Also, by the way, in the chat room, thank you, Christina, for the $5 donation. You passed A+, working on Network Plus. We're so glad you're here. Thank you for supporting what we're doing, and we're happy to help with whatever you may be working on with your Network Plus and working through those. Let's get another question in, and then we'll see where this goes from here. Our next question asks, which of the following would be the best way to determine the next hop from a device? Which of the following would be the best way to determine the next hop from a device? Would it be netstat, dig, route, Nmap, or hop? Is it netstat, dig, route, Nmap, or hop? If you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. I'm going to figure this out. It's so true. We will be talking a little bit about things in the after show. And in fact, Bob in the chat room talking about the pipeline issue here on the East Coast with the ransomware. Certainly an issue, but not a lot of information available, is there? I tried doing some research on this because this is something certainly I was expecting to come up, well, next week, certainly during the Security Plus study group, where we probably are going to talk about the frag attack for wireless, and we'll talk about perhaps anything we might learn about the pipeline ransomware situation. But they haven't released a lot of information, so it's all speculation at this point as to what's going on. We have very little information about any of those things. So, but we do know it didn't actually affect the machinery running the pipeline. But they disconnected from that because they were concerned about it getting into those devices. So even that is something reported in the media, which of course at this point, as I've mentioned to all of you, whenever you hear anything about technology reported in the media, it's probably wrong. At some part of it, there's a section of what they're saying that is absolutely incorrect. Always. It seems to be a universal truth. Hopefully, maybe not so bad on this particular story. Let's see how you did with this question. Which of the following would be the best way to determine the next hop from a device? Is it netstat, dig, route, Nmap, or hop? Your results show 68% of you said you would use the route command to determine the next hop. Nmap, 11% of you said Nmap, because why wouldn't you? Because Nmap is awesome. 8% said dig. Dig not quite as awesome, but still 8% of you chose that. 8% said netstat, and 6% said hop, which, as some people were mentioning in the chat room, not actually a thing. I very rarely make up answers. I made up that answer. So hop is not a thing. So we know we can take E right out of the equation because that is not an actual, maybe there is a command or utility out there called hop, but that's not what we're talking about here. Certainly not one that is normally connected. But 66% of you said route, and that's because if you, for example, in Windows, pop open a command line window and you type route print, it will print out and show you the list of routes. Now, I didn't tell you what kind of device. And for those of you in the chat room, I'm surprised the Linux people are not all over me right now for choosing route as the correct answer, because as we all know, the netstat command with a netstat-r will also show you the routes. Does it do that in Windows though? Somebody do a netstat and in Windows with that. There's probably a -r or a -route in Windows too that will do that. So I will accept either of those. I will accept route, and I will accept the 8% of you that said netstat, because I want to believe that you knew about that relatively unusual option of netstat. It's not that unusual, I guess, because it at least is one of the few things you can do in Linux or Mac OS to look at the routes. So there you go. /r works in Windows. There you go. It's a universal truth. Whether you're a Linux, your Mac OS, or your Windows, netstat-r shows you the routes. Pretty useful, huh? You don't even have to know the route command. Just does the same thing. So useful. Now, what about these other options here, though? Of course, Nmap, 12% of you said Nmap, double digits. And although Nmap is an amazing utility, I wrote an entire book on it, and it's something you should know, certainly for your network and security IT professionals. It doesn't tell us anything about a next hop to a device, at least not inherently. Maybe you can find a script, an Nmap scripting engine script that you can put with that to show you, but that's not built in. That's something you'd have to build yourself. By itself, Nmap doesn't do that, so it would not be the best way to determine that route. And then you've got dig, which is a great way to query a name server, but querying name servers doesn't tell you anything about a next hop either, so that would not be the right answer. Hop, as I mentioned, 5% of you chose hop, not a real thing. So sorry. I hate doing that. But that was it. So your correct answers are both route, answer C, and I will also accept netstat-r, which I'm sure is what you were thinking when you answered this. Either one of those I'll take as an acceptable, correct answer. That absolutely is the correct answers for this one, and a great way to find the next hop from a particular device. Very, very simple to do and find that. Yeah, I guess a trace route would show you the next hop, especially between, if you're going from point A to point B, it will tell you what the next hop is as you're going to that point B. The trace route, not here. Route is a different command than trace route, as you can tell because of the spellings. That's how I tell every time. Route and netstat were great places, great options to choose. You should be able to use both of them. Very useful. Multiple choice, multiple answer. You can't beat that. All of this information, it's in my course notes. Everything that's in my videos is in my course notes. All of the details from the exam objectives are in the course notes. There are both physical and digital versions of the course notes. There's the digital version. I have the PDF up here on my screen. I was just going through and looking at some of the options and seeing what's there. It's all listed in these course notes. If you ever needed some way to be able to collapse everything from 101 videos, 12 hours of video into one single document, this is it. This can really help you with your final push on studies because everything is in one place. It is all categorized. It's all listed in the order of the exam objectives. It is searchable in the digital version, and you can also request a physical version, which I will ship to you. There's a little extra to pay for that one because it's printed on these dead trees, but I'll also give you the digital version for free. If you get the physical version, I will give you the digital version for free, and you'll have all that too. That is available on my website as well, professormesser.com/NPCN, which stands for Network Plus Course Notes. See what I did there? Very easy way to find that. And another great way to support what we do here. So all of these things, they all work together. They all motivate me. They all keep things going. And I think it may be something that could be really useful for you in your studies, which indeed is really the most important part of this. It'd be worthless if this didn't actually help you. And I think it does. This is the set of notes I wish I had when I was taking my Network Plus. Hopefully that can help you as well. ProfessorMesser.com/NPCN. Let's do another one. We've got more questions here. This next question asks, a firewall needs to be configured to allow clock synchronization. Which of the following ports should be opened? Would it be UDP 123, TCP 3389, TCP 22, UDP 53, or TCP 445? A firewall needs to be configured to allow clock synchronization. Which of the following ports should be opened? UDP 123, TCP 3389, TCP 22, UDP 53, or TCP 445? If you think you know the answer, go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. See if you'd happen to know what it is. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. You'll be able to figure this out. I think some of you know these. Maybe if you go through these questions and you're trying to figure out in your head, which one of these would you choose? This is where you also get into these situations when you're working with these technologies that you'll be faced with this when you're configuring your firewall. Someone will say, oh, we got a new app we're bringing live. Oh, what? We didn't tell you? We've only been working on it for 6 months. Anyway, we need this done right now. Please enable this interface. This is one that you should certainly know. You should know off the top of your head. A lot of people even say, why do I have to memorize port numbers? I could just Google them. Well, this is not necessarily the best thing you should be doing during your day, is Googling every time you have to do something like this. I often tell people, do you Google how to drive your car? No, you just hop in your car and you drive. That's the way you do it. So in this particular case, this is one of those scenarios where this is a key piece of information as a network professional you should know right off the top of your head. So this is certainly a good piece of this in understanding the deals, the technologies of this. This is, of course, kind of rote memorization because you do have to know these. But as you use these port numbers and technologies, it sort of just becomes to know this and have that there. So that is the important part. Now, after this point, once you know what you need to do, maybe now you need to Google how to do it. But this is fundamental. This is not one of these things that you should be Googling. This should be normal. A good question on this one, do you need to know the transport protocol? As I mentioned in my videos, the exam objectives only have the numbers. But as I tell you, as a networking professional, that doesn't help you if you don't know the transport protocol. You have to know both. They're different. A TCP 3389 is different than a UDP 3389. Those are completely different things. So when somebody says open up 3389, okay, both? One? Which one? What are we doing? What are you using it for? There's a whole bunch of questions that have to be asked. And you have to know which one is commonly used for this so that you can open up the right port numbers. So I always put in TCP UDP so that you can see that. If I know CompTIA doesn't show you that in the exam objectives, I show you that because that's how important it is. Let's see how you did with this one. A firewall needs to be configured to allow clock synchronization. Which of the following ports should be opened? UDP 123, TCP 3389, TCP 22, UDP 53, and TCP 445. 73% of you said, I'll open up UDP 123. And then effectively a four-way tie for second between TCP 3389, TCP 22, UDP 53, and TCP 445. There's a lot of numbers here. There's a lot of numbers and letters coming through this. Now, 72% saying UDP 123. This is kind of an easy one to remember. Thinking about a clock. On the clock, you have a 1, a 2, a 3 as you go around the face of the clock. That should help you remember. A UDP 123 is used for the Network Time Protocol, the NTP. This is a protocol that devices will use to synchronize their clocks. Your machine that you are using right now has an NTP client running in it right now. And every hour, every 6 hours, every 12 hours, every day, whatever it is, it will go out to an NTP server somewhere on the internet. It's configured with, if you look in Windows, it's part of your clock configuration, probably goes to time.microsoft.com or time.windows.com. I forget which one they use. On mine, it goes to, by default, I think, time.apple.com. You could also use, there are some free services that do this at ntp.org. I think I'm doing it right. Where you can configure any of your devices to go there as well. NTP 123 UDP. That's how all of this works together. This is what synchronizes all those clocks on your machine. And from a networking perspective, this is a critical service. This is not just convenient to have this running on my computer, although it certainly is convenient on your own computer. But when you're talking about switches, routers, firewalls, servers, and all of these devices that are creating log files, if you have a log file that is off 30 seconds from the actual time, it creates havoc when you're trying to bring all of this together and figure out what happened when. You can't do any type of correlation if these times are off. This is also why time zones are so important on these devices. So make sure that you understand exactly how these devices are configured. Are they updating themselves properly? Are they configured with the right time? Because if you've done it correctly, there's like a millisecond difference between them. Like it's really close all the way across. So make sure. NTP is so incredibly important. And as people are mentioning in the chat room, with some protocols like Kerberos, which is used in Windows to authenticate using Active Directory, you only have a 5-minute window there. You have to be within 5 minutes of what the ticket granting server, the Active Directory server, is configured as. So Kerberos, very, very sensitive to that. LDAP is not sensitive to that at all. LDAP doesn't care what time of day it is. But Kerberos uses certificates. It is assigning certificates. There are expirations associated with those certificates. There is a lot going back and forth between those. So NTP, incredibly important. And when NTP messes up, you know very quickly because your log files suddenly become worthless to you. So make sure you're familiar with how NTP might work. That is the right answer. UDP 123 is NTP. These other protocols like TCP 3389 for remote desktop protocol, that is not what is used to do clock synchronization. That's for viewing the screen of a remote device. Or TCP 22, if you want to SSH into a device, that's what you would use. UDP 53 used for DNS. That's not what we're using. And then TCP 445 is a protocol used by Windows to communicate directly to another device over IP, to share files, to print, and perform other SMB services. TCP 445. That is your list of port numbers. And of course, there are many port numbers you need to know on the exam. They are all listed in your exam objectives. Those are the ones you need to know, absolutely. For those of you that are watching this video for continuing education unit credit, here's how you can receive an email from me that has been digitally signed, which certifies that you are here. You can go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, go to the link that says Contact Us, which is really Contact Me. It's going directly into my email inbox. This is going to ask you for a name. Put your name, put your email address, because I'm emailing this back to you. See how that works? In the subject line, if you would put, this is the May 2021 Network Plus study group or something close to that. And then in the body of the message by itself, if you would put on a line by itself, UDP/123. That is our super secret code word of the month. UDP/123 is our super secret code word. And then if you'd like to put anything else in that message, please feel free to do that. I read through every single one of these you send me. I'm not always able to respond back because I get hundreds of these every month, but I'm more than happy to read through, and I do like to see the messages you put in there. Thank you for sending them. That is at the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. Click Contact Us, put your name, email, in the subject line, put this is the May 2021 Network Plus study group, and then in the line by itself, put a super secret code word of UDP/123. That way I know you must have watched at least up to this point, right? Because you knew the number. I know we're getting near the top of the hour, but let's get at least one more in here. I have another question for you. This question asks, which of the following would provide connectivity between two separate broadcast domains? Would it be a switch, a router, a repeater, an access point, or a modem? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Which of the following would provide connectivity between two separate broadcast domains? Would it be switch, router, repeater, access point, or modem? What would it be? What would it be? It's got to be one of those, right? See if you happen to know what it is. Lock in your answer by going to professormesser.com/QA. See if you can lock that in. See if you happen to know what I think a lot of people know this one, because there were a lot of people that suddenly went boom really quick and put in super fast what they thought the answer was. I always see when the numbers go up really quick, I think, that didn't fool many people. Or did it? Sometimes we've seen that too, where these problems have certainly come up and shown up with issues. Remember, no answers in the chat room, no hints in the chat room, please. We want to be sure that everybody has a chance to answer this one by going to professormesser.com/QA and locking in your answer and figuring out the details. I don't know. This one's very tricky. This one's pretty straightforward. It's a pretty straightforward question. The answers, though, are always tricky. See, that's where they get you. It's not the question that's the problem. It's the answers that's the problem. That's where we want to go. We'll figure out the details from this. We got it written down somewhere, right? This is where you do have to know these different domains. There's broadcast domains. There's collision domains. There's Active Directory domains. There's domains in the exam objectives. That's not the same thing. But we use the term. It's a very broad term that we use for all of those things. Having that capability there. You have to, so somebody in the chat room mentioning bought a printer yesterday, had to turn on NTP. It was John that said that. And in fact, even here in my studio, I've got this mixer. The mixer has a clock on it. The mixer I had to configure with NTP. It's actually running kind of a Linux thing in there. So figuring out the details. I have to figure out the answer on this one too. See if you happen to know what this is. So I hope as we're going through the details of this, that you're getting familiar with what the different options are and how that works. Chris in the chat room says NTP on printers rarely works. That's unusual. Works great on mine. NTP is so easy. It pretty much works everywhere to have this. Let's see what you know about broadcast domains, though. The question asked, which of the following would provide connectivity between two separate broadcast domains? And your results showed 64% of you said router, 27% of you said switch, 6% said access point, and then 2% said modem, 1% said repeater. So we're talking about a broadcast domain. The devices that are used to separate one broadcast domain from another, effectively, what device do you put on a network that broadcasts cannot traverse? What blocks broadcasts from going through it? Well, that's a router. That's what you want to use, is a router to be able to do that. And in the chat room, some people said, well, could you use layer 3 switches? You can't, because there's no such thing as a layer 3 switch. Sorry. You would be using a router. Since you said layer 3, you'd be using a router. You would not be using a switch. Switch is layer 2, therefore layer 3 switches can't exist. See how that works? Yes, I know there are devices that call themselves layer 3 switches, but they obviously don't exist. Hopefully you kept up with that. That's sort of a standard thing that we know here in the study group, isn't it? Layer 3, if we say layer 3 ever, we're talking about a router. And we need to make sure everybody understands that we're talking about a router, because routers, of course, connect a lot of different kind of networks together. Well, in some cases, it's the same kind of network together, but routers always block broadcasts. Broadcasts cannot traverse a router. Therefore, the router separates one broadcast domain from another. That's how you would do that. The router is the thing that provides that functionality. If you're talking about anything dealing with layer 3 and you happen to have a device that is able to perform and make forwarding decisions based on an IP address that's a layer 3 device, that could be a switch that has a router built into it. We call those switches with routers built into them. We could be a router itself. Could be a firewall that operates at layer 3. A lot of firewalls operate at layer 3. So firewalls are also effectively a router. So switches are routers, routers are routers, and firewalls are routers. Hey, we could turn on routing within an operating system. Windows is a router and Linux is a router. So a lot of devices can route. is my point. So anything that can route and has that routing functionality turned on can also divide up different broadcast domains. So in this case, route, layer 3, 63% of you got that absolutely right. Answer B was the correct answer. A switch does not have the ability and does not separate or block broadcasts. That's not what, in fact, switches, that would break everything if a switch blocked the broadcasts. So at least on IPv4, right? So switches allow broadcasts to go back and forth for this. This is the real key. And in the chat room, you're not going to be able to argue with me about layer 3 switches. They don't exist. I'm sorry. Even though I know you think there's some software and hardware thing going on there, there isn't, because they don't exist. We'll talk more about that in the after show. Switch, 27% of you said switches, but switches don't block broadcasts. They block collision domains. So if you hear a switch, you're really talking about collision domains, not broadcast domains. Very different things. We're using that domain word again, but it's really just to describe, take domain off of it. Broadcasts are blocked by routers. Collisions are blocked by switches. Just think of it that way. And then you've got, and of course, collisions don't exist anymore either. Yet another thing that doesn't exist. You aren't going to find a collision anywhere. That's not the situation you run into. You won't find any hubs either. Although you do have to know what all these different things are. You will run into one somewhere. So it's not that you're never going to find one. You will be rummaging through your data center. You're going to open up the back of a cabinet that's got like cobwebs on it. And inside there is going to be a hub. It's going to be a switch, an old switch. And you're going to see the collision light blinking. And you're going to say, I know what that is. I know what that collision light is because I found this back here in this very old 19-inch cabinet. Repeaters and access points and modems are not used at any part of broadcast areas. So that is absolutely not the right answer either. Repeaters are great for simply repeating information. They're not going to block broadcasts. Access points are effectively switches. They are bridges. They bridge between a wired network and a wireless network. They are effectively layer 2 switches. But we call them access points because they have the wireless piece on them. So those don't block broadcasts. And modems don't block broadcasts either. They're more of a layer 1 device in how they operate. So the best answer, the only answer here, is indeed router. Answer B, 64% of you got that one absolutely right to have that there. I do have a funny story about a hub. We'll talk about that one in the after show too. LB Survival in the chat room. Thank you for the $5 donation. Definitely not the wrong group. More than happy to say thank you, and I'm more than happy to take the donation. Thank you for doing that. Passed the A+ Core 2 exam, A+ certified. Congratulations. We love to hear stories of people passing their exams. So always love to hear it. It's never a bad time to tell me that you passed your certification exam. Always like to see it and hear it. And thank you for the donation as well. We do appreciate that. Thanks for the love. We will, I know it's after the top of the hour. Let's get one more question in because I talked so much this time. So let's do one more. Since we're talking about routers, I have this question for you, which asks, a router has failed on an internet link. Which of the following would describe the time required to fix this issue? Would it be SLA, MPLS, MTBF, MIMO, or MTTR? So I'm looking at this question now and wondering what it would be. A router has failed on an internet link. Which of the following would describe the time required to fix this issue? Would it be SLA, MPLS, MTBF, MIMO, or MTTR? What would it be? What would it be? Actually, I'm looking at these and wondering, could this be another one where I choose more than one? Could I accept this to be more than one? Because it's all about context, isn't it? This might be one of those where context is a little bit different, sort of outside the scope of context, and working through all of this. Maybe you know what the differences are with these. But another one where it's all acronyms, and I think it could possibly be two of these. But not really. So I'm looking at this, really just one. In my mind, it's one that I was working towards. So but we know about my mind, don't we? It's my mind is the problem. And we'll step through and understand more about this in just a moment. The questions you get in your exam are probably going to be better than this one. There will not be any ambiguity on your exam. The only ambiguity comes when we're in these study groups and we're trying to feel out different ideas and different things that we put in here. There's lots here we could look at to figure out the different ones. This is where I think if we start breaking apart the questions too far, it starts getting a little crazy. And I try to make these questions so they're very specific to a particular technology. The problem on this one, of course, is that there's all these acronyms. You have to unpack the acronym or at least understand what the acronym's talking about, and then you can apply it back to the question, which, by the way, is a pretty common tactic on the exam. It's really multiple steps to get to the final answer. And this is one where I think the final steps in getting there is the real challenge. Let's see how you did with this one. A router's failed on an internet link. Which of the following would describe the time required to fix the issue? I think that's the name of it makes a lot of sense. Is it SLA, MPLS, MTBF, MIMO, or MTTR? So I think most of you were thinking what I was thinking. 59% have said MTTR. But I think 24% of you, after I reread it, said, I think it could be SLA. And let's talk about why it could be either of those. We have a three-way tie for third. MPLS, MTBF, and MIMO did not make the cut in this particular case. The one that I was thinking initially when I created this was MTTR, the mean time to repair. When something breaks, how long does it take to fix it? Which is what I was trying to describe in this question, which was the routers failed. Which one of these would describe the time required to fix the issue? And MTTR is what I was thinking in my mind as well. Now, we also add in here MTBF, but that describes how long between failures, the mean time between the failures. That's not what we were looking for in this question. Certainly applies to some of this. But as some of you have mentioned, what if you are a service provider that is contracted with a company that has had their router fail, and in your contract is a requirement that this router, if it fails, you are contractually required to fix this in 2 hours and be back up and running? That's very common to see in something like a service level agreement. That is the contract with a third party that you say, we're contracting with you. This router fails, no matter what time of day it is, no matter what day it is, you have to be here and have it fixed and up and running in 2 hours. Or 4 hours is a very common time frame, 4-hour response time for this. So I would accept service level agreement as well as an answer here, which is why, well, I think 59% of you said MTTR, 23% said SLA. I'd say almost all of us got that one right. I'm going with that. I think both of those are acceptable. I think it's just a badly written question. Who wrote this? I wrote this. I did it. Sorry. But they can't all be winners, people. We also know now that MTBF is not the correct answer. MPLS is a type of network topology. Not what we would choose in this answer either. And MIMO, we've already talked about that. Multiple input, multiple output. Not a good choice for this either. Has nothing to do with fixing routers. The two that make sense, MTTR makes a lot of sense. SLA makes a lot of sense. I'll accept either one of those. They're both really good answers. They both apply to this question. Had the person writing the question just spent a little bit more time or paid a little bit more attention to what they were doing. I'm that person. So they did do a very good job, but next time they will. But I'll accept both answers. So in a way, I've already fixed the problem. We flip a coin, you're a winner either way. See how that works? So nice to do that. All of these topics, except the one HOP, the one that I made up, came from the exam objectives, and you should absolutely get your hands on these objectives. They should be the first thing you download when you start your studies. They should be the last thing you reference before going into your exam because they're a great checklist and they're free. There's a link you can go to download at professormesser.com/objectives. If you can see it, you'd be able to click on that. professormesser.com/objectives will give you everything you need for those objectives. Full disk encryption is on the objectives. File integrity is on the objectives. They're on the objectives. They're on there. So you may not see that abbreviation, but that is the abbreviation we use when we describe those technologies, is those that are there. We do one of these study groups every month. You're welcome to come back in June. On June the 16th, we're doing another Network Plus study group. Next week, here in May, we're doing a Security Plus study group a week from today, same time, just a week later, next Wednesday. So you're more than happy to come through and attend the Security Plus as well. But next month, on the 8th and 9th is our A+, the 16th is the Network Plus, the 23rd is our Security Plus. You're more than welcome to come back. And if you're looking at this as on a replay, or perhaps we're getting close to the 16th, and you're wondering, is he still planning to do it on the 16th? Because quite honestly, my world sometimes is a little chaotic. Sometimes I have to move these dates around. Always check the calendar. I constantly keep the calendar updated. ProfessorMesser.com/calendar. If I ever make a change, that's the first thing I change so that everybody will know. So ProfessorMesser.com/calendar. Chris won't make it. Chris is getting married next month, apparently on the 16th, on a Wednesday. How does that work? Well, you get married whenever they open the up. You get married whenever the wife wants to get married. That's how it works. I know exactly how it works, Chris. I'm not surprised. Congratulations on the upcoming nuptials, and you're absolutely allowed to skip because of that. Stick around. We got more coming. The after show, plenty more to go through. Don't forget about the success bundle at ProfessorMesser.com/netsuccess. You know, I didn't even mention in the pre-show, for those of you that are on the website, you're going to take your Network Plus exam. You're looking for discounted vouchers. You're scouring the internet for some type of discount code. Why are you doing that? What if you just could go to a website and everything was already discounted and you wouldn't need a code and you got a free copy of my Exam Hacks ebook? You would go to ProfessorMesser.com/vouchers. A great way to get your vouchers, a great way to support the site, and you get some free things along with it. You won't get my Exam Hacks ebook somewhere else buying that voucher. You only get it at ProfessorMesser.com/vouchers. And of course, don't forget about our YouTube, our Twitter, our Instagram, our Facebook, our LinkedIn. Just type in ProfessorMesser.com/ the name of the thing you would like to find me on. And if I am on that thing, it will take you there. It's not meant to be some type of magical discovery. It's just normal things. I don't think there's anything there you'd be able to find by that you don't know already. But those are the easy way to do it. ProfessorMesser.com/YouTube/Twitter/Instagram/Facebook/LinkedIn. It'll get you there for all of those things. Well, thank you for being here in this first hour. Stick around for the after show. We got plenty more Q&A. We'll talk about hacks. We'll talk about all of these weird things that are going on in the world. We'll talk about Network Plus and whether there will ever be practice exams. All these questions. Stick around for that. Otherwise, thank you for being here in this first hour, and we'll see you next time on the study group. Now, let me see if I can click a few things on this side. There I am. Hey, everybody. Camille in the chat room. Thank you for the £5 donation. I appreciate the love. I see you there. And you don't have to put a message in there. You can just give me £5. I'm fine with that. Thank you. I'd appreciate that. We really do appreciate that. It's nice not only to know that you support what we're doing, the ability to have money that we can use to make more of these things only helps. So absolutely works there. The vouchers are available for United States, Canada, Mexico, Guam, Puerto Rico. If you're not in those countries or territories, then unfortunately my vouchers won't be any good to you. I'm so sorry. Yeah, so for those of you, Australia is not going to help you much. You have to be in effectively North America, which in this definition of North America includes Canada, US, Mexico. Technically now includes Guam. Did you know Guam was in North America? Now you know. And Puerto Rico, also not North America, still accepting it. Just the weirdness, however they do it. There's something about the dollars, and I don't keep track of those things. Okay, instead of me talking, let me get the phone lines up and running so that we can get some questions asked using voice communication. Who thought we'd be doing that? I'll also take questions from the chat room. So that in the chat room is the great way to do it. The donations come in the super chat in the chat room, right at the top of the chat room that's there. Our instructions on how to do that. And we do appreciate that. Let me, since I'm the only one here, let me be the one that calls into Skype so that I can get those lines up and running, because it's now really just waiting on me at this point. and making all this happen. Let me type in a few things here. My
Enter your 6-digit PIN.
I will do that if I can remember what it is. My 6-digit PIN, and if I got that right...
Welcome, Professor Messer.
Thanks, nice lady. She says that every time. She must get tired of that. Every time I call in, she's waiting on the call. She tells me every time, put in the Skype number, and she never gets tired of any of those things. So that works. We are now, of course, up and running. Oh, I got the wrong graphic there. That's not going to help anybody, but it's pretty, isn't it? Let's change our graphics around. I now have to be like a television producer, where we're now moving graphics around. We're now hitting some buttons. And if I do the right thing, you'll see that there is a toll-free number in the continental United States you can use to call us. That toll-free number is 855-785-RJ45. West of the Rockies, 855-785-7545. That will get you there. This is also something you can use with Skype to call, because Skype doesn't require any Skype minutes if you're calling a toll-free number. I pay for the minutes. You just have to put a +1 at the beginning. So +1, 855-785-7545 will also allow you to call into that, and I'll take questions from the chat room. So for those of you, I see them coming through chat room. For instance, a question from Bob saying, do I play chess? I do, very badly. There you go. See? That was easy. I'm the worst chess player. I like the chess questions that are like, that are something I can very quickly get through and I'm done. So to have some of these online systems like chess.com where it goes deep, 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 I'm not that person. I can't sit through a whole chess setup. I just don't have, there's a lot going on in my world. I just don't have time to do that. But checkmate in one, I can do that. I like the checkmate kind of problems. Those are kind of fun because you can do it. You're in, you're out. Am I a fan of Stargate SG-1? I noticed some references to what could be allegedly some of those characters in my course notes. Well, of course, any type of coincidence there, anything that may appear to be as if it is related to Stargate SG-1 is clearly a coincidence, because otherwise it would be some type of trademark infringement. And certainly I'm not doing anything like that. Those names are simply random. See how that works? I'm glad we were able to figure out that piece. Kendra in the chat room, thank you for the $5 donation. Is there overlap from A+/Network Plus on the Security Plus exam? I would not say overlap, but there are a number of topics on Security Plus that will help you if you have some familiarity with Network Plus. Certainly the Network Plus devices, understanding what an IPS does, understanding proxies. Those are things that are on Network Plus that show up again on Security Plus. And for those relatively few topics, I'm pulling the slide right out of Network Plus and I'm pasting it into Security Plus. There's not much difference between those, although I do update a little bit of the text on a number of these, especially if it needs to have more of a security slant. You know, we can talk about routers and some type of ACL on the Network Plus. But when you get into Security Plus, now how do you configure a firewall with those rules? You know, that's the difference, is knowing what a firewall does with Network Plus, actually doing it, setting up a firewall rule base, a series of ACLs in Security Plus. See, it's different. It's the same topic, but there's a little bit of a different twist on it. So that's why I mentioned I would say there's a little overlap. I think it helps. And other people who've taken Security Plus and are learning these topics say it was made a little easier for them because there were so many topics they recognized from the Network Plus. Now, on the other side of that, I have a number of people that come to my site that are taking Security Plus as their very first certification. They need it for a job with the U.S. federal government. Maybe the place they're working wants them to get Security Plus. It's their very first cert. And they're taking that as their first one. So for them, they're now having to learn what a firewall is, what an IPS is. They didn't get all of that with Network Plus because they didn't take Network Plus. They just have to spend a little more time learning it. So there's nothing in Security Plus that requires you to know the Network Plus content, but it certainly helps. If you don't know it, you'll just have to end up learning it during Security Plus, and all of it's in there too. That's how we do that. At least if you ever get through the scenario where you're trying to piece together, what do I need to know? What do I not need to know? Just go right to the exam objectives. That is ultimately the right answer, is go to the exam objectives. That's going to help you a lot. IP filtering, in the chat room question on IP filtering, what do we need to know, if anything? And then you qualified it with stateful, stateless, dynamic. Okay, throw those out, because those are certainly important things you need to know. Don't throw them out, but they don't have anything to do with configuring IP filtering functionality, mostly because every device you will ever run into that does any type of IP filtering, period, is a stateful device. I guess when we get into routers, it's a little bit different, with just a simple router ACL is in some ways stateless, but we don't commonly use router ACLs as security devices. We don't usually at least require that. They can be useful as a filtering device. But what you need to know for the Network Plus is that those devices filter. You don't necessarily need to know how to do the filtering. When you get to Security Plus, I've got a performance-based question we've done on our study groups where I present you with a network diagram, and I say, here's a scenario with this server to that server, this client to that server. Here are the protocols that need to run between those two, or the functions that need to operate. Make some rules in a firewall that will allow or disallow that. Okay, well, that's good. That's the part that I think you need to know, but that's for Security Plus. You don't have to worry too much about that. Now, for Network Plus, you do need to understand what a firewall is, how it works, what is stateful, what is stateless. I guess the dynamic part, you're referring to routing protocols, I'm assuming. We do need to know the difference between a static route and a dynamic route. Those are important, certainly on Network Plus. And there's a lot of dynamic routing protocols you need to be aware of. You need to know about RIP. You need to know about OSPF and EIGRP and BGP. Those are dynamic routing protocols. But you don't necessarily have to know a lot about those. You know, the Network Plus is trying to get you knowledgeable in the terms and what they mean and how they work together. But they don't necessarily require you to understand the nuances of each one of those. And trust me, OSPF, BGP, EIGRP, there's plenty of nuance there. You could spend your entire career trying to become an expert in any of those. They are very, especially with BGP and OSPF, incredibly complex protocols. So, and being able to know them well enough to design and implement and troubleshoot is difficult enough to be able to do that. So that's where I sort of look at what you need to know and how you need to know it. The basic overview of that is really going to be in your exam objectives. If your exam objectives go deep into that topic, then you should go deep into that topic. If the exam objectives do not go deep into that topic, then you do not need to go deep into that topic. They also don't need to go much outside the scope of that either. If you're someone who's looking at the exam objectives and you see this grouping of port numbers, you don't need to go outside that group. I've seen people studying pages of port numbers for the Network Plus exam, but you only need to know like 14 port numbers, 15 port numbers. You don't need to know a whole page full. Just know what's in the exam objectives. That's as far as you need to go. You do not need to go further than that. So that's the important part about it. And other people in the chat room, like Rick says, I got my Security Plus without Network Plus. Just studying, work experience, the normal thing. Certainly possible. It is not a prerequisite by any means. In fact, there are no formal prerequisites for the CompTIA exams. They will teach you what you need to know as part of the exam objectives for that. But like anything else, if you come in with a little bit of knowledge, it's going to help you. And I think that's what the Network Plus really does, is kind of prepare you for some of the things that are in your Security Plus exam. Be kind of useful to have that there. So that's where sort of we come from, and working through those and having those capabilities. Maybe that'll help you as well. Do I think AI, artificial intelligence, will one day replace the average network engineer? Well, it hasn't already. AI is sort of a broad term anyway. We're already doing tons of automation. You know, we've been doing automation in IT forever. Since I've been in IT, which has been a long time. Been in IT a long time, and we've been doing automation the whole time. The automation part of it is just one tiny piece of everything else that we do. So we have been replacing people with technology since there's been technology. So will AI replace the average network engineer? What is average? I guess that's a challenge. Could it replace people? Sure. It doesn't even have to be AI. It just has to be some type of automated processes. In fact, the more you automate, the fewer people you need. So that's why a lot of companies really rely on automation. That's why you should rely on automation. So the dumb stuff, the boring stuff, all happens without you having to touch it. You've already set it up so that it can do that. So I think if you're really concerned about automation, you're concerned about replacing people, I don't think that's an issue. We've been saying that since I got into IT. That, they're just going to replace us with a bunch of machines. Well, they still haven't done it. So that's really it's one of those terms you're always going to hear. This was along the lines of back when the iPad was released and suddenly tablet computing became a thing. Everybody said, well, you don't need to take that A+ certification anymore. We're not going to have any computers anymore. It's just going to be tablets and phones. And that didn't exactly happen. It turns out we need all of them. That's the thing we weren't ready for. Suddenly it wasn't that was going to replace our laptop. Suddenly we needed not only a laptop, I also need, here we go. This is what we need. I need my tablet. There it is. I need my phone. You gotta have my phone. And then of course I need my computer. They all do different things for me at different times in different ways. So that's why I always tell people it's not that they're going to get rid of a computer. It's not that the automation is going to get rid of network engineers. It's that we're going to need all of it working together. There will always be network engineers, always be someone working on the network. Same thing for security folks. Same thing for PC administrators, server administrators. Now, does our job shift over time? Absolutely. Network folks, you're no longer trying to figure out the best way to set up your collision domains. You're no longer having to figure out broadcast storms across your bridged networks. But the topics behind that, the switching, the routing, is still a fundamental. So you may be doing it slightly different. Same thing for server folks. If you're a server administrator, do you even have servers in a data center anymore? A lot of people don't. Now everything is in the cloud, but you still have to administer the servers. Your job's a little different, but it's still the same job. You still have to make sure that system is working and really having those there. So that's the real, IRQ conflicts, configuring EMM, setting up dip switches on an adapter card to not have a memory conflict, or an address conflict. Those are the things we don't have to worry so much anymore. HiMem.sys. Have you checked your config.sys? Have you checked your autoexec.bat? Those are the things we don't have to worry so much anymore. Now it's a whole different set of things, but yet similar. The initialization, the startup process, we still have to troubleshoot the startup process. It's just a different process. So that's really, I think, the focus. Now, AI is a thing. AI is certainly, I won't even say AI. AI is sort of a broad, very badly termed broad topic. But when we talk about machine learning and being able to use machine learning for what we do in technology, there's plenty of opportunity there. It is an emerging technology. There's a lot of data. And of course, data management is becoming a huge part of IT that did not exist 10 years ago. But that's the beauty of IT, is these things change all the time. And you have to keep up with it. And you will eventually find yourself finding your way through there. Sometimes you take advantage of these new technologies. You suddenly become the master of the new technology. We went through that about 10 years ago, more than 10, 15 years ago with virtual machines. VMs hit a spot where there was a tipping point. Everybody was moving to the virtualized environments. That drove the cloud, which also drove automation. That drove us to move into more data. The more data moved us into machine learning. See how that works? So it's just a natural progress. It's not like it suddenly showed up and we had to now somehow deal with this new thing. It was an evolution that got us to this point, and there will be more evolutions as we go through this. This is not the end. It's just the beginning. It's always just the beginning. I always think that we're suddenly running this very antiquated network and that new things are coming along all the time, because they are. But I also thought the same thing 20 years ago when I was building out my network. This is antiquated network. Oh, here's some new things. Let's build out these new things. We went from hubs to switches. That was a huge change. Well, now we're going from physical switches. We're integrating with the cloud. We're connecting up virtualized switches. We're integrating different VLANs between them, all in a virtual environment. Some great technology there. But it's effectively the same switching we were doing on the physical side, except it's now virtual. So not an enormous shift in features, but a different how we use it. And that has been the real key, the real interesting part to me with all of this. It's always something new. Folks talking about my background. That is a real background. So that's my everything. That's not a green screen. I can't touch it. It's real. It's a real thing back there. That is, I tried to power up that Rubik's Cube. That's that white cube. When you power it on, I can't even do this because it's backwards. That's it. When you power it on, it turns colors and it's touch sensitive and work. I think the battery finally went out in it. It won't even charge now. I can't even power it up on the base that it powers on. It doesn't work. So sorry about that. But when it did work, you could actually move it around and solve the Rubik's Cube. Not very easily, but it is one to have all of that there. That's because you can't turn it. It doesn't turn. You slide your finger and it spins whichever way you're sliding your finger. Maybe not the best implementation, but it is something that was kind of fun. It looks great in the background, so that's where I put it. Whether that works or not, there's a lot of weird stuff back there. There's an NLX motherboard behind it. There's an Apple keyboard in front of it. There's a cricket ball. There's a picture of a joystick from an Atari 2600. There's my YouTube 100,000 subscriber badge. There's all kinds of things in there. And it's not my media room. This is my studio. This is a purpose-built studio room. Technically, it's a room that wasn't. It could be anything else, of course. There is a separate closet. There's a separate little kitchen area. It's kind of set up to be self-contained, but really was built out originally to be the studio. So this is the studio. We intentionally built that out to be the set, but it's also kind of a nice fireplace to have. I'm in Florida. It does get cold at times in Florida. So there's, a couple days out of the year, I need that fireplace. It's important. And that fireplace does turn on and is really a nice fireplace. But I usually don't turn it on during a live stream because it does get warm very quickly. It's not a huge room, but it does get very warm. So that's how that works. I don't have a Nintendo Switch. I do have a Nintendo Switch. I have the very first Nintendo Switch that came out. Absolutely. It's hard to find time on the systems. I do a lot of Xboxing. I don't do a lot of Nintendo switching, but I do have one. It's one of those things. So busy writing books and doing other things. There's not much time for those. But do I watch cricket? Not a lot. In the U.S., there's not a lot of cricket that is available. You can subscribe to cricket services where you can watch some cricket because most of it's international. There's not a huge following for cricket in the U.S. But if I do catch some here and there, sometimes you'll catch a live stream here and there, and you can watch some good cricket. But there's not a lot in the U.S. anyway for those. So the question, some people are taking umbrage to me. It's sort of a running gag in the study groups is that there's certain things about technology that I often say are either not correct or not real. And I say it with a tongue in cheek. It is meant to be not serious, but in some ways it is. So when I talked about layer 3 switches, clearly there are devices in the world that, thanks to a group of marketing professionals in a conference room that needed to sell product, they decided that they would name a product a layer 3 switch. But of course, switching makes decisions at layer 2. Routing makes decisions at layer 3. So you can't have a layer 3 switch in the same way that you wouldn't have a layer 2 router, if that makes any sense. A layer 3 switch is a single box where in this half of the box there's a switch, and in this half of the box there's a router. They are separate entities to each other, at least logically speaking. They don't integrate. You're not somehow switching at layer 3. It's not the way it works. You route at layer 3, you switch at layer 2. But because we're cramming into the same chassis and we're plugging in one power cord, we call it a layer 3 switch, as if it has some enhanced capabilities because it has switching and routing happening in the same box. It doesn't. It's the same as if we took a switch and we took a router and we just put them together. We just stuck them together back to back, maybe end to end. We put them together. Okay, that's a layer 3 switch. No, it isn't. That's a switch and that's a router. No, it's a layer 3 switch because now they're connected. See how it sounds dumb just saying it, but that's what we've been going with. But whenever you see the term layer 3 switch, it's not a magical switch. It's not a magical router. It's just this part of the device does some switching and this part of the device does some routing. And if you need to configure the switching part of it, you go over to the switch side and you configure the switch. And then when you need to configure the routing part of it, go to the other side and you configure the router. So that's what it is. It's sort of a shortcut name to say it's a switch and a router in one chassis with a single power cord. Well, that takes too long. Let's just call it a layer 3 switch. Done. What's next on the agenda? That's how that meeting went. So that's it. So that's why, in fact, I used to be a systems engineer for next generation firewall company. Our firewall could operate, it could make forwarding decisions based on a layer 3 address. So it was a router. It can make forwarding decisions based on a MAC address. It could work as a switch at layer 2. And we could also just plug it into what we call a virtual wire mode, where anything going into this interface would also be sent out the other interface, where there was really no forwarding decision happening. There was no MAC address or IP address evaluated. It was simply wired into the firewall that if anything goes into this interface, send it out this other interface. And of course, you could put the firewall rules in there. So it was effectively layer 1. Was that a layer 1 firewall? No. But that's the terminology we're using for layer 3 switches. So that's why when I mentioned it earlier, it really was meant sort of tongue in cheek. But there's actually reality to that. There really, especially when you're talking about someone learning their Network Plus. And the reason I make a ridiculous thing about this is that most of us that are going through this process of understanding these technologies are doing it for the very first time. This is your Network Plus certification. You are just beginning to understand what all of these different technologies do, how they all work together, what all these terms are, what all these abbreviations and acronyms do. We're trying to figure it out. And then we throw you this little term called layer 3 switch, and without any context, you could potentially misunderstand what that device really is. So that's why I mentioned that. Does a layer 3 switch allow you to assign IPs to more VLANs than a router? No, because a layer 3 switch is a router, and a layer 3 switch is a switch. So it's not that it's better or worse than a switch or better or worse than a router. It's the same as having a switch and a router in the same box. Literally. Now, could there be limitations to its functionality? Because once you take a switch and you take a router and you cram them together, could you be limiting what a switch could be and limiting what a router would be because we're having to do it both in the same box? Yeah. There's a sort of a term in networking where we say, let the switch, let the router route, let the firewall. It's an effort to explain, at least broadly, that devices that are doing one thing tend to do that one thing better than if you're cramming a bunch of functionality into a single box. Now, that's not always the case, but it's the case a lot of times. And generally, if it's a standalone router, there's more memory for routing tables. There's more functionality for, maybe you could have more logical interfaces on a standalone router than you could on a layer 3 switch. Maybe the ability to support more stored routes, especially if you're connecting to a BGP network. Those are very large routing tables sometimes. Maybe you have more space for the routing table on a standalone router than you would on a layer 3 switch. So if you go look at specifications for a layer 3 switch and a standalone router, you'll see entries in the specifications for number of routing entries, number of these types of entries, amount of memory allocated for this process. Those will give you a pretty good comparison between those and understanding the differences. You will certainly see differences. And what they do along those lines. Also in the chat room, how deep, James asks, how deep should I get into studying Nmap? Well, my personal preference is to tell you learn everything you can about it because it's amazing and does things you have no idea it does. There are things Nmap will do that will make you stop for a second and rethink what you know about security and what you know about the ability for these applications to do anything with security. Nmap is one of these applications that has more, the more you learn about it, the more you peel that onion, you realize, wow, there's some crazy stuff inside this onion. I'm not sure that was a great description, but that is what it does. As you're peeling this off, you're realizing there's a lot in here. There's tons of information in there. Nmap's one of these utilities, and I explained this when I was creating my book and doing some things with Nmap, videos with Nmap, is what if you were able to, over the network, send some specially crafted packets, not even a lot, maybe 1 or 2 packets to a device where you're not authenticating to the device, you've never logged into the device, you don't even have a login, but you send a specially crafted packet to that device. That device responds back to that packet a certain way. And the way that we get a response from that device allows us to determine what operating system it's running. And in some cases, what version of software may be running as a service on that device. So with a couple of packets, we could figure that's running Linux and this kernel, and it's running Apache web server, this version. And that's done with operating system scanning and version scanning. Those are 2 very major functions of Nmap. So I'm really only looking at the high level of Nmap right here. That's amazing with just a couple of packets. We're not talking about a big conversation that takes place. Sometimes 3 packets, sometimes it takes 4. If you look through the signatures that are in Nmap, it's remarkable how efficient this is. But it's not banner grabbing. We're not asking for the banner. We're not even going to a login prompt in many cases. We're simply sending a packet that might have a certain bit turned on or bit turned off, sending it to a particular port number, and we're seeing what it responds back with. Because we know if we send that particular kind of packet to that particular kind of device, and we get a response that is a certain way, we can narrow down what that device happens to be. And we never looked at a banner. Doesn't even have to have a banner. Banner could be turned off. We'd still be able to do this. Not banner grabbing. It's remarkable how functional it is. So when I talk about Nmap, you have to know at a very high level for Network Plus and Security Plus, Nmap is a port scanner. It will tell you what ports are open, what services happen to be open on a device. But it is so much more. And if you get into networking, especially if you get into IC security, the more you know about Nmap and what it's doing and how it's doing it, the better of a technologist you're going to be. In fact, you'll be able to apply that knowledge to many other things that you use in IT security. So don't stop. If you have an interest in Nmap, certainly you need to know the port scanning piece of it for your exam. But if any part of it sounds interesting to you, start doing a little bit more. Start learning a little more about it, and you will be surprised, shocked, and amazed. By the way, I say this, but to be able to do those things, you're going to need to scan things with Nmap. Do not scan things that are outside of your network unless you specifically have permission. For example, Fyodor, who writes Nmap, has said you can scan scanme.nmap.org, server that's set up just for scanning. You can scan that. You can scan things in your own private network. Do not scan things that are outside of your network or things you don't have permission to scan, things you don't explicitly have permission to scan. And using Nmap, you can crash machines. I have a great story I've told through the years about that. And I can certainly do it in my studio here. I've had devices in my studio where I've run Nmap scans and crashed the machine. And I think it was a router. In fact, I think it was my wireless router. So upgraded the software, scanned it again, crashed it again. So it's so easy. So be very careful, not only with what you are scanning, but be very careful about whose devices you're scanning. So that's important. Have that there too. Other questions from the chat room. Question from Robert says, I'm currently studying for my Network Plus. How relevant is this experience when looking for a job in IT? I guess that would depend on what the hiring manager is looking for. If you're looking for that first job in IT and you are trying to get into the business, you've never worked in IT before, there will be a job out there maybe for a network operations center. That's a good entry-level position. They want to bring someone in to work a shift for the network operations center. You're effectively babysitting a network. That's what that job is. Something goes wrong, you call somebody who can fix that thing that went wrong. It's a little bigger than that, of course. I'm simplifying in a huge degree. That's sort of the job. But it's an entry-level position. So if you go to apply to that entry-level position, the job posting may say Network Plus certification, a bonus. That'd be a plus. Network Plus is a plus. They might say A plus is what we're looking for, and we'll train you on the rest. Or they might say, we'd love for you to have these credentials or this Microsoft cert or whatever it happens to be. But the determination on whether the Network Plus is valuable in getting a job is really dependent on the hiring manager. There are a lot of jobs, though, that are looking for that. So I say it's the hiring manager. The other side of this, of course, is that there wouldn't be so many people working towards getting their Network Plus if the hiring managers and people looking for these jobs weren't actively asking for this certification. So it's sort of a push-pull win-win scenario where we're getting these certs because people are asking for it, and the people asking for it are clearly posting that they want the cert. So that's your combination. Now, if you look at all the jobs in your area, you go out to LinkedIn jobs, you go out to dice.com, you look through all these job postings in your area, and none of them mention Network Plus, but they all mention A plus. Okay, well, there's your answer. Maybe in your area, A plus is something that people will look at more than Network Plus. So that's sort of where I go from there. A follow-up to that, Carmen asks, will Network Plus be helpful for landing a sales job in security, or will you be fine with just getting Security Plus? It's the same scenario, though, where getting a job in a sales position in security, I guess it depends on the type of sales position. I worked as a systems engineer, which was mostly a pre-sales position, but a technical pre-sales position. But I worked with salespeople that did not necessarily have to be experts in security. They did need to understand the advantages, disadvantages, and what these products did. But their focus was making sure that they were able to understand the customer's needs and was able to have a systems engineer to be able to meet those needs and then ultimately find the right product and right price for the product for the customer. So it was a sort of a combination of skills all working together to find the right solution for the customer. Those are all pre-sales positions. I brought in a lot of firewalls and plugged them in for evaluation, hundreds and hundreds of times. Would bring in a firewall and plug it in for an evaluation over how long did I work there? 7 years. So there was a lot of firewalls that we were plugging in and connecting up to do evaluations. So I would certainly expect that a lot of employers are looking for certifications these days. And I think Security Plus is probably a good one to prepare you if you're looking at a salesperson role within a security company. I would think that would help. In fact, it kind of gives you more than you need to know for that particular kind of job. But for that particular kind of job, a little more is actually better. Context is better. One of the worst things you can be as a systems engineer is to walk into a room where the customer has some very specific problems they're trying to solve. You're, after having a conversation with them, you've got a very good understanding of what needs to be solved. And you have a good understanding of how your current products can fit with these things they're trying to solve. One of the worst situations you could be in is with a salesperson who doesn't understand a word of what's going on, but they feel like they should be interjecting something into the conversation, but it's always something out of left field. And then the conversation gets sort of off into a tangent. And then we have to bring everybody back. Yes, but let's focus on these 4 things you mentioned. And we bring it back like, let's focus on getting these 4 things done. If I can do all 4 of these things, will you buy this box? Oh, sure. Okay. I can do all 4 of these. Let me show you how we can do that. That's the real goal when you're trying to keep everybody very narrowly focused on what needs to happen. And with sales, there's a science to it. There's a communication is really the big skill you need. And for a technical person who's a systems engineer working in a pre-sales role, you are effectively a translator. You are trying to figure out where that fits best and how to explain these technologies to someone else. When I started with the next generation firewall company, there were no next generation firewalls. This was the very first one. Now imagine going to a customer, potential customer, getting a meeting with somebody who was nice enough to bring us in. Maybe it's somebody we've worked with in the past who said, yeah, you can come in. Sure, of course. Tell us what you got. We'd love to see it. So we go in. Imagine explaining a new technology for the very first time to someone dealing with security and explaining, I can see if you're tweeting. I can see if you're Facebooking. I can see if it's Microsoft SQL Server. I can see if there's something malicious inside of that. I can do all of this in real time. I can allow people to visit Twitter, but block them from posting to Twitter. These were technologies back in the day that sounded crazy because we did all of our firewalling with an IP address and a port number. Imagine somebody saying, oh, you're having problems with people visiting proxies, open proxies on the internet. What if I click one button, it would disable all open proxies? They could never communicate to an open proxy. Like, what? What if I clicked a button and suddenly I was scanning for 1 million viruses and blocking them in real time as they came into the network? That sounds ridiculous. Nothing does that. Well, actually, yes, this does it. Let's talk about how that happens. What year was that? 1872 is when that was. It was a long time ago, but we were just introducing this technology to the world. So we had to explain what this did. So really the first year of my job was more of an explainer of what is this thing? Because a lot of people would then say, well, there's no way a product does that. Nothing does that. That's not a real product. What you're telling me is what you want me to hear. You're trying to explain to me it's not real, except it was real, and it was amazing. I was the 95th employee of Palo Alto Networks, and we went public, and now there are thousands of people working there, all because of this sort of interesting turn with technology. But you had to become, as someone who was Security Plus certified, and the salespeople they had they were hiring people that really understood the technology, that really had a solid foundation. By that point, I'd written my book on Nmap. I'd already worked at Network Associates, already had certifications for firewalls, intrusion prevention, antivirus. Security was already something I was doing. And so they decided to hire me for whatever reason. And so I got to be part of that beginning group of people, sort of rolling out this new technology to a lot of people. But you kind of have to become this conversationalist and be able to put things in context of what people already knew. That didn't change after the first year. Once everybody realized, oh yeah, I know what a next generation firewall is. I need to do this though. Okay, well, let's have a different conversation. So you really do become very good in communicating. We often talk about, yeah, we take people to lunch and we sit around a conference room and we do these. Yes, we do. But a lot of that is us asking questions, getting to know people and trying to understand what they're trying to accomplish and making sure that we know what they're trying to do. And then bringing in equipment, plugging it in, and probably most importantly, making it do that. That's the responsibility of the systems engineer. After you've touted this product and you've said it can do these 4 things, now it's show me time. Show me it doing these 4 things. And that's what we'd have to do. Sometimes it was very straightforward. Sometimes it's kind of a new idea or a corner case or something we hadn't worked on, and you'd have to figure it out. You'd go home at night, you'd put together your lab, make sure you understood what it was doing, and then the next day you could go into the customer and say, I think I know how to set this up for you. Let's see if we can make this work, and we'll figure it out. And if we didn't, we called somebody, because that's what you do, is you call someone, and someone you know. That's whenever you're rolling out new products like that, there's this core group of systems engineers I worked with around the country. There were probably 5 or 6 of us. That was it for the whole company. So we knew each other very well. We were all in the speed dial together. We all knew what was going on. I'm making that happen. So very critical. Are firewalls being used less? Oh, heavens no. Instead of just using zero trust architecture, no, what's happening is that we've now turned on zero trust along with the firewalls already. Imagine having the firewalls in place, keeping out the bad guys, and then on the inside, there was no security. The inside was all easy to jump around from device to device. And it was that way for a very, very long time. So the firewalls are still there, protecting ingress, egress, sometimes protecting north-south traffic, but they inside the local network, we've increased the security of all of the other devices. That's really the idea behind zero trust. Zero trust is not rocket science. Zero trust is exactly what it means. Is what it says is we don't trust anybody, trust nothing on the inside of the network, which really, getting back to the earlier conversation we were having about ransomware, that's where that comes from. That's really what's been driving a lot of the zero trust is the ransomware piece of it and these worms and being able to minimize the impact. Didn't work very well for the pipeline, did it? First, before we go too much further, James in the chat room, thank you for the $10 donation. Where you say thank you for everything, I say thank you right back. I appreciate that. And we always appreciate your support and the things that you're doing. We really wouldn't be able to have a very good study group without you. So thank you for being here. The problem with the pipeline, so this is probably going to be old news if you're going to be watching this on a replay, but obviously not one of the largest pipeline companies in the U.S., what's the name? Colonial Pipeline, enormous pipelines from Texas to New York. That's how we move fuel at least in that part in the East Coast part of the country. That's a major use, a major way to move fuel from one part of our country to another because the United States is really, really big and pipelines are really, really safe. So it's probably safer and much more efficient, certainly, than having trucks and trains. So we're able to send all this fuel across the country. Well, at some point last week, that company was infected with what we understand to be ransomware. There's very little news that we've been able to get about this, and the news we have is a little fuzzy at the moment. But we know that there was an infection that we're assuming is ransomware. what they did, according to the company, the systems, the industrial systems that managed the pipelines were not infected. And let's just assume and hope that the IT professionals in that organization completely kept those separate, which is very common in the power industry and industrial industries, to keep the industrial equipment on an air-gapped network. You can't get to those networks. There's no way to get there from here. Certainly not from the internet. The only way to get to those networks would be through some type of VPN connection, which had extensive authentication associated with it, multiple factors, what you would expect. It would be highly secure, and we can assume that's the case. However, when they're hit with ransomware, the worst thing you would like to have happen is have that ransomware somehow hop over into the industrial network. So what we would have put together, what I think they have told us at this point, is that they turned off everything at the moment because they have to fix it all and they don't want ransomware getting over. And in reality, the way that you fix ransomware is you just burn everything to the ground. You delete everything and then you build it back. That's the only way to do it. For those of you that have taken A+ and they give you the steps for removing malware, you never do that. You do that if you have to get some data, and there's no other way to do that. But if you are any other company doing any other thing, and eventually after you do those steps in removing ransomware and you've been able to get the data you were trying to get, then you delete everything. Then you burn everything to the ground and you build it back up again. So we think that's what was going on or has been going on with this company, is that the IT people have not been sleeping. I'm sure third parties have been brought in. Certainly, the government has been involved with this. I'm sure they have brought in, somebody's parachuted in who is very familiar with these technologies, because we have gotten some information, I don't know how valid or where it came from, that talked about who they think was behind this particular flavor of ransomware. And that's the piece we're at now, is that suddenly people realized, oh, I might have a problem getting gasoline. Let's all go today to every gas station and gas up our car. Which, by the way, if there wasn't a pipeline outage, would still cause all of the gas to go away, because gas isn't just coming out of the ground. We have to have trucks visit the gas station. The truck pumps the gas into the gas station, and then the truck goes to their next gas station. There are only so many of these trucks. There is only so many ways to get gas from point A to point B. And just like if everybody showed up at the bank and wanted their money out of their account, the bank would not have enough, because the money's in your house. The money's in your house. But here, same problem. Is the gas. There's only so much petrol at this gas station. We fill up everybody's tanks. There's no more gas. Now I got to wait for the next delivery. There's no other way to get the gas there. And even if I mentioned if there wasn't an outage with the pipelines, well, we'd still have the same problem if everybody showed up wanting gas today, which we are having problems with right now. So we're struggling with this. The reality is, the pipeline's going to be probably back up and running shortly if it isn't already. We'll have gas suddenly flowing again. It's not going to be out. It's not going to be a situation we were in the 70s where there really wasn't any gas. Here we have petrol, at least. So at least we'll be able to, everybody will settle down. We'll see there's still gas coming in. So that's it. That's the key. Is letting everybody settle down a little bit. We'll make sure the trucks are still running. The trains are still running. Eventually, the pipeline's going to be running again, if it isn't already, and we're fine. So what caused the ransomware? Was it a directed ransomware? Was it something other than ransomware? Is that what they're telling us? And it's really something else? Or was it just random that it showed up? We don't know. We don't know these things. We may never know those types of things because of the sensitivity of this particular infection. We'll probably know very broadly what happened in sort of very, very big terms, like it happened on this day and it happened this, and we don't think it was this, but that's probably all we're going to hear about it. We'll never know anything else. It certainly has. It's certainly feasible that this could just be a random. Somebody clicked the wrong thing. Somebody picked up a USB drive and plugged in it. Something happened where it was just a random ransomware that happened to bring those down. It just happened to be with a very important service that is part of our infrastructure, our energy infrastructure in the United States. Therefore, it's a very broad attack, with a very broad scope. And we're dealing with that now. I really tried to find more information on this, and maybe there'll be more about this time next week when we do our Security Plus study group. But let's hope that certainly when we get to that point, we'll know a little more about this. But we just don't know much right now. Just waiting for that to happen. And plenty, as I mentioned in the chat room, plenty of conspiracy theories. It was the aliens, of course. We all know it was the aliens. It was the Russians. It was pick your favorite political area. Okay, it was them. It was the ones that I am a part of. It was the other ones. Whatever group I like, it was the group I don't like that did this. That's who did it. We don't know yet. We just aren't sure. We'll figure it out though. I mentioned earlier about hubs. And how my story about hubs, this kind of it's an older story with older references that have no applicability to today's technologies. Perfect for an old guy like me to talk about as if it had some type of modern perspective, but it actually does. So back in the day, when Ethernet was running about 100 megabit, we didn't quite have gig network yet. We needed some faster ways to do networking, and everybody was trying to figure out what their faster way to do networking was going to be. Was it going to be a faster form of ArcNet? Was it going to be a faster form of Ethernet? And then we introduced a newer technology called ATM, asynchronous transfer mode, not ATM like the machine. This was a protocol, a topology, if you will, that had the ability to put voice, video, and data on the same network and have it in a way that was very deterministic. Now, when I say that, what I mean is that it didn't use packets. It sort of did, except we didn't call them packets. We called them cells, because the cells, these literally a 53-byte cell, and how they came up with 53 bytes, it's its own ridiculousness. But these cells would come through at very standard times. It wasn't like Ethernet where there's jitter, where certain packets can come in and there'd be a certain delay. There'd be random delays as the packets come in because Ethernet is non-deterministic. But ATM is very determined. It was designed to be deterministic, like an assembly line. Every millisecond, you're getting a cell. Whether there's something in the cell or not, it doesn't matter. The boxes are always coming down the assembly line in the same order, at the same distance between each box, which was perfect for voice. Imagine a voice conversation where the packets going across the network came in exactly the right time, at exactly the right pacing, at exactly the same state every single time. There was no jitter. There was no deviation. You knew the next cell was coming down the line right after the first one. It was beautiful in its design, really was. And a lot of the things you see on the Network Plus exam regarding the OC standards became more popularized because we were running OC3 and OC12, and in some cases OC48 on our local networks in our buildings. We were connecting up ATM switches, connecting up backbones with ATM. We were connecting ATM connected phones. We were running ATM everywhere. There were companies that were becoming public, that were big players in technology, that all they did was ATM. 4 technologies. FORE was a big one. And ATM was going to be the next big thing. And then Ethernet came out with Gig Ethernet. And we were running gigabit technologies over a type of networking that was very familiar and comfortable to everyone and did not have the complexity of ATM. But when ATM was really getting big and we were connecting up and having these very expensive switches, we would have these trade shows. This one happened to be either in Atlanta or in Vegas because it was called Interop. I assume, I don't even know if they still do interop. Interop stands for interoperability. It was originally designed to be a trade show where people would bring their equipment and make sure their equipment could talk to each other. Eventually turned into just an enormous trade show in the industry that people will come and show their newest and latest things. And that year was the year of ATM, and they connected up the whole show floor with all of these ATM switches and this fiber. It was amazing. And then one of the things I noticed, though, because I was there at the show, I was with probably Network General at the time. We had an ATM analyzer. We could plug into an ATM network and see the cells. It was great. And I noticed if I went over to the connections, they had these big sort of an MDF, IDF scenario where the intermediate distribution frames were spread across the trade floor. And I noticed on top that they got all this ATM equipment inside with all this fiber, and the lights were flashing. You could open it up, and it was amazing inside. But on the top of it, in the back, I noticed there was at the time, Synoptics switch. There was a Synoptics hub. There's a hub across the back, just a 100 megabit hub. And I stopped one of the guys that ran that show floor. I said, "Why is there a hub up here?" He goes, "Well, that's really what's connecting all these together, because we can't trust the ATM's going to be up and running. It's all brand new. We had to put something in place to be kind of the core so we could connect to the boxes." Now, the ATMs were connected, and they were running, and they were transferring data. But his point was, what if that doesn't work? We need something else to at least be able to allow us to connect to these boxes to manage them. And they were just using 100 megabit Ethernet with these hubs. So this big fancy trade show that had all of this ATM and latest technologies and all of this, just had an Ethernet hub on the back connecting really all that together. So that's probably a great number of morals can be taken from that. Certainly not morals, maybe lessons can be taken from that. And it made perfect sense, and it worked, and they were happy, and it was great. And it all worked. As it turns out, the ATM network continued to run. There wasn't a problem with it. They really didn't use the Ethernet network. I was just very amused that you had this hundreds of thousands of dollars of equipment and fiber inside of this rack, but on the top was a $100 hub, really connecting it all together. That's my hub story. Now, obviously, we don't do much with hubs anymore. We don't have collisions. We don't do any of those things. But at the time, that we got a little bit of a chuckle out of that, a little bit of a laugh. Let's go to a phone call. Go to the 313 area code. Hello, caller. Which name were you calling from? Oh, I hope if I turn that on. Hi, caller. Now that I turned it on.
Hello.
Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Ali calling from Salem, New Hampshire. How you doing?
Hello, Ali. Thanks for calling.
Well, finally we got the job. That's so. Thanks to you.
Congratulations.
You helped me with. Thank you. Yeah, that was helpful with especially the way to interview. You know, I was doing it totally the wrong way, but so finally I get this job now, and it's great. I'm learning a lot of stuff at the job.
So what job is it that you managed to get, and what allowed you to get it?
So I'm working for an MSP now, and they have me at the school working for the school now. Like they have one of the elementary and the high school district. They have the account for that, so they have me kind of like working there doing the IT.
Oh, this is great. So for those of you not familiar with MSPs, a managed service provider. So it sounds like the school has contracted with the MSP to be able to provide IT services. And the things you learn on a school, on a K through 12 network is remarkable. And I would expect you're probably learning quite a bit in a very short period of time.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a Windows Server, you know, it's printers, it's iPad management, MDM, Google Admin.
Wow.
Which I never, you know, didn't really dig into it before. I never knew what it could do. So now we are managing the Chromebooks through that, the iPads through that mobile Guardian, and then even they have they just showed us the firewall. They have a Palo Alto firewall. So the guy there is nice. He's like he sees that I want to learn, and he's just like, okay, I can show you this, I can show you that, and so it's been very fun. A lot of learning in a short period of time. It's been 6 months now.
Now, listen to you. You sound like you're right in the middle of it, working with all these different technologies, learning all of these new things. I certainly have a soft spot in my heart for the Palo Alto Networks firewall, and you're doing exactly the right thing, especially if there's somebody willing to show you some of these technologies and learn about them. That is fantastic. What a great opportunity for learning, because you'll certainly be at this MSP for a while. You'll be learning the ropes and understanding these new technologies, but this is what will give you the knowledge to do whatever the next thing is going to be, and then the next thing after that. So what a great opportunity to start learning from.
Yeah, and even too the VMware system that they have, VMware and the Reduxio storage, so it's like it's a lot, but I'm just digging into all of this stuff, so which is great, and I felt in this 6 months I grew so much, in this field,
You're getting me excited. I want to go work in the same environment that you're in. There's a lot of good stuff there.
Yeah, that's a good thing. It's like you're not just learning one thing. And I know you said, at the end of the day, you're going to lean towards, or you're going to specialize maybe in the future in one section, maybe firewall, maybe VMware, maybe whatever you feel like, whatever you learn, or you feel like it's closest to you, or you think that's the best for you.
This is the thing that a good environment to do this in is where you are. One of the things that I found, and I used to go around to a lot of different kinds of vertical markets. I go to financial companies, transportation companies, manufacturing companies, colleges, universities, K through 12, state and local government. And each one of them has a number of similarities, but each of them is very different in how they operate. If you were at a financial company, they tend to be very siloed. So you would get hired and you would be in charge of Windows Server. And that's all you would do all day would be Windows Server. But it's very common, especially in K through 12, they don't have a lot of resources. There's not a lot of money available. They've often outsourced a lot of what they're doing to an MSP, which works perfectly in that scenario. But they have so many different kinds of technologies. And you've mentioned a good smattering of them already. There's differences of desktops. You've got printers. You've got the mobile devices. You mentioned the MDM and the tablets that they're using. You've got now the things that are happening in the cloud, the Google administration. All of these are sort of just this very broad set of technologies that now you're able to kind of wrap your arms around and learn as much as you can about all of those, because you'll find that the next job you work at, you may not have all of these technologies to play around with. You may not have access to them. And if there was ever a time when you wanted access to, a Palo Alto Networks firewall, those don't come easy. There's not a lot of those around everywhere you go. You don't have one of those at home, generally speaking. Like, that's a great opportunity to learn that technology and learn at least something about that technology. Same thing on the server side, same thing on the MDM side. You really are in a position where you can learn a lot in a very short period of time, and it's great to hear that you found this position and you're able to work along those lines. Yeah, no, thank you. And my question to you is, because I'm trying, I started with watching some Palo Alto, YouTube video, there's like an 8-hour, starting from scratch. But we were trying to do something at the school, and even the kind of like the network admin, still he couldn't figure it out. But I just want to get your input. If you're trying to, if you have two different networks, if you are you have the school network and then you have a guest network, what we're trying to do is to print to just two specific printers on
on the school network because they don't want to give them access. They don't want to give the guest students any access to the whole network. They just want them to have access to 2 printers. Can you do that with the rule? Like when you create a rule, you can do that?
You absolutely can. Of course, it's going to depend on how those 2 networks are connected to each other. You have to understand, are they on separate VLANs? Are they on separate routed networks? Are they in separate, for Palo Alto, of course, separate security zones? And then for the rule that you're putting in, you're probably going to be using more than just an IP address and port number. You may have to understand the print technology that's being used. Are they using Microsoft SMB to print? Are they using a Linux print function like printd or something along those lines? Are they using some other type of printing protocols? And it may be that you have to allow everything between those IP addresses, see what goes past in the Palo Alto Network logs, which will tell you what applications are in use, and then you can go back and tighten down the rules a little bit more. So that's sometimes what we would have to do, because sometimes you just don't know how these applications work, is you just create a simple rule that allows IP address to IP address, run the app, and then look through the logs to see what really ran between those. Sometimes it was what you expected. Sometimes it was not. And then you could, of course, tighten down the rule from there to only allow that particular application on the network.
So, yeah, so there are 2 separate VLANs. So you mean the best way to do it is, like, if you want to specify from this network to this printer, so you have to do like kind of like an IP to IP or IP to the port, which is it's the same.
Yeah, that's how I would do it. So let's say that those 2 networks, on a Palo Alto Networks firewall, it's what you call a zone-based firewall, which means that every interface, whether it's a physical interface or logical interface, is assigned a zone name. The default on the firewalls is you have a trusted zone and you have an untrusted zone. The idea would be the untrusted zone would be the internet. The trusted zone would be the inside of your network. But of course, you can create mini zones, and they can have different names. You could have a data center zone. You could have a building 1 zone. You could have a floor 7 zone. And then you can set up rules that would allow anyone communicating from floor 7 to data center could allow this functionality. Which is kind of nice. You don't have to deal with IP addresses or port numbers if you don't want to. But the way I would probably set this one up, if I knew what the print server IP address was, I would say from the guest network zone, allow all traffic into or at least some traffic into the internal network zone to this specific IP address. And I would just kind of leave it generic there. And then I'd commit that particular config, and then see what traffic was, try printing. Somebody try printing to that printer and get the traffic, make sure it printed properly. Then you could go back through your firewall logs to see what was it really doing there. Was it doing an SMB print? Did it need to have Active Directory to be able to find it? Did we need DNS to be able to talk DNS to our internal DNS server so that it could find the printer and at that point be able to print? So there's things that might happen prior to that. So a lot of things could be messing up the printing process, but unless you had it opened up and logging, you would never be able to see that. So it's a good way to set it up to at least see what's happening so that you can then create even more precise rules.
Oh, okay. So from the guest network, you can point it to the print server or the printers that are on the print server, the ones I want to print to. And then, but do you have to create a rule back for the traffic to go back the other way?
You do not. Not on a Palo Alto Networks firewall, and not on most firewalls these days, because the firewall is stateful. It knows that if you made an initial query to that printer, that it should be expecting a response from that printer. And since you already initiated that query and that initiated query was allowed through the firewall, the associated response will also be allowed through the firewall, even though you didn't set up a specific rule to allow that response. The firewall is smart enough to know it's part of the same traffic flow. We will allow that traffic to come back through the firewall.
Oh, okay. And if I'm trying, because obviously now I'm trying to figure it out on my own, and so if I create the rule and apply it, it's not going to mess anything up, right? Like because it's just that rule. I can just kind of deactivate it, or
that is kind of the
right?
loaded question, because anytime you make a change to a firewall, there of course is always the potential that you could mess something up. But that's a relatively simple change on a Palo Alto Networks firewall. For those that aren't familiar, when you make a configuration change, it doesn't go into effect until you commit the change. So you set up all the changes you want, you click a commit button, and then it applies that change into the firewall, into the actual operations of the firewall. If you're only making one change and you commit that change and it does mess something up, it's very easy. In fact, there is a log that keeps track of every commit. You could simply revert back to the previous commit you had, and then everything would be fine. So there's always a way to get back to where you were, even if you do happen to mess something up. But this particular rule is relatively straightforward. You kind of put it in the firewall rule base. You're allowing traffic through. It's a relatively simple rule. That shouldn't cause very many problems on the network.
All right, I'm going to give it a shot because, I like challenges. And every time, even the guy was very surprised that I'm taking on a lot of stuff because, kind of involved in everything.
Good.
But that's how I am. I don't like to just, learn one thing and just sit there and do nothing. I just like to be involved in everything. And that's going to help me down the road.
No question. That is one of the best things you can do. And not all jobs that you have will give you this level of opportunity that you're in right now. If I could only just give you some context, not all jobs are going to allow you or give you the number of resources you have available in this particular one. I highly recommend, and you're already doing it, highly recommend if anybody's in this position, absolutely be a sponge. Try to learn as much as you can about everything that's there. It can only help you later on.
Yeah, exactly. Because I talked to my colleagues, people that came from different backgrounds, and they would tell me, especially like when they work for, there's a guy who works for Fidelity. He said, there's just people for Active Directory, there's people for just DNS, everybody, as you just mentioned before, is like everybody have a specialty within even Windows Server. Not everybody does everything in just Windows Server.
There's advantages and disadvantages to that, but certainly if you're trying to learn and you're trying to move up and you're trying to get a foundational knowledge that you'll be able to then do other things with in this industry and ideally get a better job, make more money, and do those things, it certainly helps if you have a wider breadth of knowledge, and it sounds like you're in a perfect environment for that.
Yeah, that's my plan now is, to be honest with you, I was looking at some jobs in Harvard, and I see they pay very well, and it looks like it's a good environment, and I talked to some people there, so I'm kind of gearing up for that, I'm aiming for that, which is going to be very nice,
That's fantastic. Ali, best of luck with that. I'm so glad to hear about the job. I love what you're doing with it. As someone who's a former Palo Alto Network systems engineer, I love that you're learning about that technology. You could I did spend years of my life learning about that technology and still didn't learn everything. So you've got plenty of things to work on, plenty of things to learn about. It's a very exciting time, and I wish you the best of luck.
Oh, no, just one last thing is there a place like a VM or something that we can do, to practice on the Palo Alto, or you have to really have the physical product?
No, Palo Alto Networks has a virtual machine version of their firewall. Obviously, there's costs associated with having a full-blown version of this, but I would expect that the company or the school that bought these firewalls have a systems engineer that they work with, and that systems engineer for that particular account they absolutely have the ability to spin up a demo for you that you would be able to run on your own laptop or your own computer. So I would ask them if they wouldn't mind sending an email to their local systems engineer and see if they could give you just a demo of the VM version of the firewall that you could run on your local machine. The version that you can run without any licensing can give you some basic functionality, but even if they could enable an evaluation or demo license for you, you'd be able to do a few extra things in there. But at a bare minimum, it would be great just to grab one and run. You can run it in VMware, and it works fantastic.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much, Professor Mesa. Again, thank you for your notes and whatever you told me there, and I applied, and I got 2 jobs, and then I picked one. It just happened after I talked to you, like in a couple of weeks. That's how things change, you know.
Well, you did the hard part, and you continue to do the hard part. So congratulations and best of luck.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too. I love those calls. I'm good now for the rest of the week. Like there's nothing else that can go wrong at this point. That was a great call. Ali, congratulations on your job. That's the way it works. This is a crazy industry where you apply yourself, you learn the technologies, you become more knowledgeable in the things that are around you. You therefore become more valuable, and suddenly you realize there's more places to go. There's more things to learn. There's more salary to make. And the sky's the limit for all of this. Curie in the chat room, thank you for the $2 donation. I guess you liked my hub and switch conversation. I appreciate that, and thank you for your donation there as well. The chat room also asked, did I finish the Security Plus 601 videos? Oh, yeah, they've been done. So I say been done. It's been at least a week. The videos are finished. They're done. They're posted. They're available. They're downloadable if you get the Success Bundle. Yeah, all the Security Plus is now out and available. Anybody learning SY0-601, the full complete course is available. 21 and a half hours, 177 videos. More videos in this course than any other course we've ever created. Remarkable the amount of content that's in this SY0-601. It's a big course. It's a big set of exam objectives. So, of course, it's big. And it's probably the most comprehensive and certainly broadest set of videos that we've ever done for a course. Just extensive. Good stuff to find that there. So if you're someone studying for Security Plus, you've still got time to finish up and take your SY0-501 because it retires on July 31st. So you've got 2.5 months at this point. You know, if you hurry, you can get through that. But it's one of those situations where you're coming up on a point where you'll have to make a decision. Do I finish up 501? Can I make it by July 31st? If you can't, you should be really looking at the 601 course, because that one will be around for the next 3 years or so. So that's the good one that you would work. Also, Bob says the way you cut and edit the videos is as fantastic as you're teaching. I don't know if my cutting and editing is so great, but it's workable. The way that I do the courses, the way that I sit here for the courses, obviously, but the way I do it is that every grouping of information is every slide you see, I probably do 5 or 6 times in front of the camera. And the problem is that on the first one, part of it's good. On the second one, part of it's good. The third one, part of it's good. The fourth one, part of it's good. So I kind of take the good parts and squish them together, which most of the time works out okay. Timing wise, you can kind of see some cuts in there. I've chosen in the 601 to use cuts that are simply dissolve cuts. If it's for those of you doing any type of video editing, we're going to go deep inside baseball a little bit. I'm doing dissolve cuts between all of those, which I think works pretty well because I don't move a lot when I'm talking to the camera. But those of you that are familiar with any type of video editing these days, the type of cuts you can do now are also, depending on what the platform you're using, are morph cuts. Some platforms call it a smooth cut, where it will interpolate one scene from another and effectively morph you from one scene to another. So instead of dissolving where you would see me sort of moving a little bit, it simply gradually moves me over the next few frames. So it looks like I'm simply leaning like this. It really was one cut where I was here and the other cut where I was here. And instead, what you see is this. And I continue to talk. Really remarkable that technology even exists, really. But that's good stuff. For my video editing, since we are getting into later in the study group, we can kind of go off topic quite a bit if you'd like. The video I edit primarily, I think for the Security Plus was 100% in Adobe Premiere Pro. I have the Adobe suite of products because I use a lot of different things. Previous courses, I have used Apple's video editor, which is, why can't I remember the name offhand? Final Cut? Yeah, Final Cut. So I've used Final Cut from Apple, which is great as well. I think that's one of those that worked perfectly fine. There were some idiosyncrasies with it that did not work well for me. And so I rely on Adobe's Premiere Pro now and this. If I have these two things, this is my Shuttle Pro from Contour. So I edit with this and do it all in Premiere Pro. And I don't touch the keyboards, this and the mouse. So I never touch the keyboard when I'm editing. Rarely touch the keyboard. I really don't have to. If I ever touch the keyboard, I realize, well, I need to reprogram one of these buttons to do what I just did on the keyboard. Because the editing is actually relatively straightforward. It's timing, it's cutting, it's kind of putting it back together, sticking a transition in, and then off you go. So that's all I ever do with the editing. So that would work whether I was using Premiere Pro, Final Cut. If I was using, what's the one from Blackmagic? DaVinci. If I was using DaVinci, which is free. If you ever need a free video editor, a really amazing, capable video editor, DaVinci is amazing and very functional and free. DaVinci is where I first saw the smooth cut and thought, let's try that. Now, there are a few things I'm working on. Maybe the next series I do will all be morph cuts, which is what Premiere Pro calls it. Where it looks like I never stopped talking. Like I've just constantly talked for 15 minutes and it was just one cut. But that's obviously not real. That's not even close to being real. I can barely do a sentence sometimes and get all the way through it. So that's where that comes from. Premiere Pro is practically everything I use for that. And very easy to get running too. I've never used Wondershare. I've seen it before, not much of it. I really should go look more at that one. I'm always interested in the latest video editing type software, but we have a very specific workflow here that I use. A lot of the hard work is done prior to shooting. So a lot of the work was done prior to me ever sitting down and turning the camera on. Once the camera is on, I'm just going through everything that I've already pieced together, which is effectively the slides. I'm looking at the same slides that you see when I'm talking. And I'm the one that wrote the slides. And a lot of people say, well, you're reading from the slides. Well, I'm not really reading them as much as telling you what I wrote on the slides when I wrote them, which I guess that does sound like the same thing. We do talk around the content on the slide, though. It's not just reading from the slide. But I'm the one that wrote it. So, of course, that's what I'm going to say. I meant to say that because I wrote it down so I would tell you that way. And I go through all that content. We stop shooting for that video, and then I have one file I can shoot from. I shoot one file is the headshot. The one you see here is one of the cameras, and the other camera is what's on the screen in front of me, which is this happens to be what we were just looking at. So those are the two videos that I edit. I grab both of those videos. They go into Premiere Pro. I do myself as a picture in a picture, and we just run through it. So there you go. That's well, one of these days I should really capture me editing it so that you could see that. Adobe Premiere Pro is the name of the video editing software. Premiere Pro. That's what it is. So that is extremely useful. Very easy to use once you kind of get into it. Once we kind of work through it, I think I can bring up one of the presentations we have for this so you can kind of get a feel for Premiere Pro. So here's a good example of me working through one of these. So really, we've got 2 tracks that we really work through, which is one track of me talking across the top here. And you can't see the output of this because I have it on a separate window on my other screen, so I can see what's really going on. If you were to look over my shoulder, it would make a little more sense. So I'm working in front of me mostly, and I'm looking over here to see what the output is. And when I play it, that's where that goes. And so I've got the screen that was in front of me just underneath, and then I let her rip. And I'm usually editing at this speed. So this is
at a management level, you might have a data owner. This is a person in the organization who is responsible for a certain set of data.
And so I'm just sort of going through and doing all of this at the same time, working through all of those different pieces and running through the editing that way. So the thing that looks like a big mouse, for those of you wondering, it's a big mouse. That's really, for those of you wondering, why does it look like the mouse is like the size of his hand? Well, because literally it's the size of my hand. This is called a hand shoe mouse because it's the size of a shoe, I guess. This is it. Let me pull this up. I got a lot of wires here. It's wired. This is the size of my mouse. So it's my hand. It's kind of hard to get context there that sits on that. And it literally just rests on the mouse. That's how big. It's enormous. Silly now showing it to you. That's how big the mouse is. It's the size of my head. This is how big the mouse, but boy, how comfortable that is. For someone who does as much work, I'm here at my desk at 7 in the morning, and most of the time I'm not leaving till 10 at night. So having something where I can just rest my hand on the mouse, so comfortable, so nice, so useful. To have that. Now, awful for gaming. Just the worst mouse for gaming because it's so big you can't move it around the screen. So I don't generally game on my computer that's in here because I just don't like sitting in here and gaming. I prefer sitting back and gaming. That's why we mentioned earlier the Xbox. But that mouse is amazing. It's comfortable. I never get tired of using that mouse. It's kind of hard to see because it's so dark, it's so black in here. It's kind of hard to capture what's going on. But it is a wired mouse. It is, of course, optical. But boy, it's great. Hand shoe, and you can get different sizes. You can get a left hand or a right hand, and then you get small, medium, large. And on their website, they have measuring. So you measure the size of your hand. They tell you, well, this size is probably going to work best for you. And I've got this just enormous paw. So they say, okay, you need the large. I think this is the large that I got. And I think I've gone through a couple of these at this point. I go through mice, keyboards. I go through a lot, generally speaking. Not a lot. I guess once a year, I'm swapping them out just because I'm using them constantly and work through those. It's a hand shoe mouse from, who makes this? Here it is. Hippus. Hand shoe. You look up hand shoe mouse. And I've tried different ones. The mouse, it's all relative. Everybody has their own opinion. It's all very specific to you and how you like to work. Here's their website. I just like their stuff. I just like their mouse. I don't really have any vested interest. I guess if you went out, I'm not even sure I have the mouse on my studio. If you go to professormesser.com/studio, I try to list out everything that I use, my in-ear monitors, keyboard, mouse, whatever it happens to be. I'm not sure the mouse is there, though. I should put that out there. So I don't use the smaller mice because it's just, with a hand like mine. Do I have a regular mouse here? I had one. Here it is. So here's a regular mouse. You see that mouse? That's how big my hand is. So, I can palm a basketball, no problem. That's how big my hand is. So using this mouse is ridiculous. This is a this is a Logitech. It's like their biggest Logitech regular size mouse. This is their Performance MX. That's a regular size mouse. In fact, that's a kind of a bigger size mouse because it's got the little piece here. You can just kind of stick your hand on, your thumb on. But notice my pinky comes off the side. That's an awful mouse to use for me. But if I'm gaming, that's what I want to use because it's fast. So you get into, like people say in the chat room, you get into claw mode where you're just clawing. It's just awful. This is not for long-term use, that doesn't work well for me. So I don't use that. This is the mouse I actually have that if I needed to change something over on my streaming server, I can turn this mouse on and do it without being in the other room. So that's why that's sitting there. It's wireless to the machine in the other room. Who needs a KVM? We'll just have a bunch of mice and keyboards sitting on my desk. But that's why the Handshoe mouse is so useful to me because it's just so comfortable. Great for editing, fantastic for doing normal office type things. Not so great for gaming. So that's all. For gaming, for those of you asking, it's all Xbox for me. If I can do it on the Xbox, I will do that. Now, Xbox doesn't have, the games on Xbox don't tend to go as deep or detailed as a lot of the games that I like on a PC platform. Let's take, for example, EVE Online. EVE Online is a very feature-rich game, graphically rich, advanced capabilities in the game. It is complex in operation and scope, and there's no way that would work on an Xbox. It can't. There's no way that would work the same way on an Xbox because Xbox is a very simple controller. That's it. But I also would like to be able to leave my studio and lean back and play a game rather than being here and sitting up and playing a game. That makes sense. So I have a trade-off. I would rather play Division 2 on Xbox where I'm running around and shooting people because that's what you do on an Xbox. Rather than sitting in here and going through space. Actually, on the Xbox, they have Elite Dangerous, which I have played recently. That's a pretty feature-rich game. That's a very complex game. That is a very broad scope game, and it's on Xbox. So it's there. So there are some very, very deep and detailed games on Xbox that are very, very useful. But that's just one of those interesting situations that it's about where I want to sit at the end of the day. Do I want to sit in here or do I want to sit on my couch? That's not how you're supposed to make a decision about gaming, but that's exactly how I make a decision about gaming. Whether that's right or wrong, that's what I do. Since we're going way off scope, let's answer some more questions in the chat room since we have a little bit of time. The question was, what do I think about cryptocurrency? Do I have money on it? I have quite a bit of cryptocurrency investments, and I consider them primarily investments at this point. The cryptocurrency market, it's in its infancy. I know it's been out for years and years and years, but it really is the infancy. It does not have major support by normal doing business during the day kind of support yet. We're not at that point. The potential is certainly there. For someone like me who has products that I would like to be able to sell to anyone in the world, cryptocurrency is a fantastic function. Imagine being able to have any financial transaction directly with anybody else across borders without having to go through a bank, without having to pay a fee just because you live in a different country, which today sounds ridiculous, really. But you do today have that with credit cards. If you buy something internationally with a credit card, there's a fee that comes with it for the most part. That's kind of a problem. So I love the idea of cryptocurrency. Some work better along those lines than others. Some are, and the vast majority of them today obviously are investment platforms because we've just not seen that happen. They're extremely a chaotic investment platform. But that's kind of where they are today for the most part. But I have some that I have had for years and years and years that have done very well I mean, I'm not rich because of my cryptocurrency, but the amount that I've invested has multiplied over time. So that part's good. But as we know, cryptocurrency, it could all just divide over time as well. That's the problem with cryptocurrency, is that the volatility is off the charts, and being able to work through it. There's some great investments there. I've done investments that I know I'm going to keep for many, many years and just hold. There's others that I just do speculatively, where, hey, something just became popular. Let's just throw some money on that, watch it become popular, and then we can decide what to do with that. Do we sell? Do we hold? Do we convert it to something else? What do you do? It's like anything else. If you're doing anything with the stock market and with cryptocurrency, it's about diversification and timing. And so you should be looking at your 401k. You should be looking at cryptocurrencies. You should be looking at these investment mechanisms because there's something underneath that's valuable. The Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash especially, has some legs. And there's a reason they exist. Ethereum, there's platforms and games built on Ethereum. There's a reason it exists. So there's at least in my mind some justification behind choosing that as an investment. And then you have situations like we've had this past month with Dogecoin, where there's nothing in that coin that is a purpose. Like, it has no purpose. Its purpose was to spoof the existence of Bitcoin. That's the only reason it exists. And that's the reason, of course, that it got up to a certain point and then it was no longer viable. And suddenly now everybody's like, well, that was fun. What do we do next? Now we come off of it. But I have a little bit of Dogecoin. I have just a teeny bit. But that's because we're just going to see what happens. And it's kind of fun to play around with at a relatively low investment point. And I don't have to go to a third party. I don't have to deal with a bank. I don't have to deal with an investment firm. I can just go online, buy it, watch it. It's kind of fun. Is it gambling? Oh, yes. Cryptocurrency is nothing but gambling at this point. It's just so chaotic and volatile that you really can't describe it as anything but. However, there are people buying my products using cryptocurrency today, because I will accept on the page where I accept cryptocurrency, I will take Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash and Ethereum and Doge and a lot of others. Whatever I have one processor, and they just handle all of that for me. All you have to do is say, what do you want? And it puts up a code and you can send it to that address. That, and it's all integrated. I don't have to do anything on my side. It's integrated to my membership software. And if it goes through, it tells my server, you get access, and now you can download the things you're doing. Same thing for BAT, the basic attention token. A lot of people use the Brave browser and they visit my site, and I've configured my site to be an authorized Brave browser site. You could donate that way, and people sometimes do, which is great. And I appreciate it. And I keep those BAT coins, and they're just stored away. I'm all about holding and keeping those there. But the ability, as someone who is, throughout my career, I've done tons of international travel, and it's constantly frustrating to me the processes you have to go through just to be able to exchange and use money in another country, or to pay extra to use your credit card in another country. That's frustrating to me, because there's nothing between us when we're standing in the same room. If I go to Europe, I go to the UK, and I want to buy something, I'm in the same room as the thing that I want to buy. Why is there this additional thing happening? Why is there another fee for me to exchange money or to pay for something that, of course, I know why, because somebody wants to get paid. They have created a platform that makes it difficult to buy things internationally, specifically so they can charge you money for that. Or at least there's a need on their part to continue that, so that they can continue to charge you for that service, because it is a service. But what if there wasn't a need for the service? That's where cryptocurrency really has potential value. And I say potential value because obviously we're not at that point where I can walk anywhere in the world and pay for something with Ethereum, or pay for something with Doge, or pay for something with Bitcoin Cash. And at this point, why would you, when the prices keep going up? Hold. You hold and you watch it go up, and at some point we'll all decide we're tired of it and we'll sell. Is that how it works? We'll find out. We don't know how this ends. That's the beauty, another beauty of cryptocurrency. It's a mystery. We don't know what's going to happen. There's new things all the time, and we aren't sure where people are going to latch on and what the next big thing is going to be. So there's kind of a fun part to it as well. Like any other investment, like stock market, like I've invested in stocks in the stock market that have done great. I've invested in stocks in the stock market that have tanked, mostly tanked. If you ever need a bad recommendation for stock market, I'm your person. This is why I work in IT. This is why I do training videos, because I'm not really good at doing the stock market thing, but it's interesting anyway. There's always something you can learn from those pieces of it. So I try to learn, and we watch and we wait and we see what happens with it. And it's not something you can do overnight. It's not overnight. Hey, I just got rich overnight. It's not the way it works, but it's interesting to see what we're going to be able to do with this in the future. And there is going to be a future in that. We just have to figure out what that's going to be. Well, that was kind of a long, conversation about cryptocurrency, which is neither here nor there, because it doesn't have that public using it. It's not top of mind for people. They still think it's something isolated that's over on, the geeky side. And to most folks it is. But as soon as it sort of breaks out, one of these is going to break out a little more. There's going to be some type of application that really uses it. There's going to be some type of mechanism that starts really taking advantage of a cryptocurrency at a large public scale. And that's where you're going to start to see people really using it. And that's when you start to see what other financial related organizations do around it. Because there's a little bit of that going on too. We'll have to see. It's nothing is ever the same. There's always changes. There's always something going on. So hopefully that'll give you some perspective. I'm more than happy to take your tips and your ideas of where you think we should be doing something with cryptocurrency, but you will not be finding me creating cryptocurrency videos on my YouTube channel though, unless it's here's what we lost today in crypto. That's my new podcast, How to Lose Everything in Cryptocurrency. I'm completely knowledgeable there. How to make money in crypto, can't help you. I just don't think those videos are going to be very watchable. Here's what we lost this week. Have a look. Here's the bad investments I made today. This would be a very short video. It's this one, this one, this one. I had this much, now I don't. So that's how that works. Are my Linux videos still relevant? Well, not really. There aren't that many of them. At one point, for those of you not familiar, I started to build out some Linux Plus videos. And then about 10 videos in, I was not interested in making them anymore for a number of different reasons. Like it did not work to have Linux Plus videos. So I just stopped making them. So I did like 10 of them. The 10 that I made are pretty close to still being applicable to today's technology. Some things with Linux have changed. Some things about the kernel and the startup process have changed a little bit, the services that run and how they run. But that's how that works. You've got at least a little bit to pull from there, and they're mostly accurate. You can still run the things that I do in those videos, but there's not a lot of them. There's just like 10. It's like a handful. And I don't currently have plans to make any others. It just did not work out for a couple of different reasons. Just not a good fit. It's like what you tell someone when you're trying to let them go. It's just not a good fit. It's not me. It's not you. It's just not a good fit. And that's what I felt. It wasn't Linux Plus. It wasn't me. It just wasn't the right combo. Maybe eventually there will be. And most of the commands are the same across multiple distributions. They're all pretty familiar. And in the videos, I talk a little bit about that. When there is a difference, I describe in this distribution, it's this way. In this distribution, it's this way. Yeah, where system D. And, all these changes occurred over the last number of years where it's a completely different way of doing it. And then you get to talk to Linux people who are very good at telling you about what they liked and didn't like in the videos. There's a whole different set of things happening behind the scenes when you make a Linux video. What about a blockchain video? I have a very short blockchain video that's just an overview of the blockchain in my Security Plus course. It's very basic. It goes through like the 6 or 7 steps of making a purchase using cryptocurrency and the blockchain. Doesn't go into a lot of detail because there's a lot of detail you could go into. It doesn't go into any of those details about where does the currency come from and what is the mining part and how do you track this through the ledger and what are all these crazy addresses and what are the... I don't go into any of that. It's really designed specifically for Security Plus, which is really giving you an overview and making you understand for somebody who's never heard of the blockchain, why is this useful? What can it be used for? How does it work at a very high level? That's all that video is. It's probably a 4-minute video. There's not much to it. But that's all that Security Plus requires. There's no need to go deeper than that. And I really don't have planned to make any blockchain videos or go deeper into that. There's plenty to pull from on YouTube. There's no reason for me to make one of those. I like to make content that's unique, at least unique to some degree. So I do have some ideas for different videos, but it's just not going to be anything that anybody else has done. I do have some interesting ideas. I don't know if it has any legs, but we'll have to see. It's one of those where you have to try it, see if it does. And we've been trying some different kinds of videos that have worked out very well. Our video on how to get a job in IT with no experience has done well. Our videos on why your resume was rejected got some very good views. But my goal is not really... My goal with this is for you to get a job or get a better job. That is, for better or worse, that's our mission statement. I hate that term, but that's what we focus on. If what I'm doing allows you to get a job or get a better job, then I'm doing the right thing. If I start making other videos that go outside the scope of that, cryptocurrency this week, Linux Plus for whatever, I don't know that necessarily works well for our mission. Could I make those videos? Yeah. Could we get views on those videos? Probably. But when I'm doing those videos, I could be doing something else that would allow you to get a job or get a better job. So it's really just about numbers. It's about where am I spending my time and am I doing it in a responsible way for what we are doing here. Like any other entrepreneur, anybody who's trying to build a business, anybody who has a business or wants to do a business, I got 20 ideas. I got 20 companies I could create. I'm just one person though. So there will always be projects that are left on the floor, that are cut off and they're on a shelf somewhere, and they will probably always be there. There's just not enough time, not enough resources to be able to do all of those projects. I really think all the projects on my shelf are viable. I just got to pick them, got to pick and choose. And hopefully that's a good thing. It would be bad if I didn't have anything that I thought I could do. That would be bad for everybody. So, but I have plenty to do. For those wondering right now, just to bring you up to date, Security Plus videos have been created. The courses are available. People can download them. They can look at them. They can get the audio. They can get the course notes. The next step on those is to create some practice exams for Security Plus. The practice exams will be out whenever they're done. Next month, maybe, somewhere in there, probably. So as soon as I write them, they will be finished. There's never a deadline. People always say, what date will they be released? I have no idea. It's whenever I finish writing them. I don't have anybody standing behind me saying, you must get this out on the 30th. It must be out on the 15th. Nobody says that. I want to create the best possible product. And whenever I feel that that's done, that's when I release it. Do I want to have it released as fast as possible? Yes, I'm pushing right now. I'm in push mode. So I mentioned I come in the morning, I leave late at night. It's cyclical for me. Once that's done, once the active course is not in production, okay, it's not quite so much time in the studio. It's more about a normal workflow. But right now we're just pushing, and practice exams for Security Plus are big. Now, question in the chat room, popular question in the chat room. Practice exams have been something we've released over the past year. This is a relatively new product but people like them a lot. They've found that it provides them with information that they just can't get anywhere else, which of course is why we built them, because I wasn't happy with the practice exams I saw. So I wanted to build a set of practice exams that would be good enough for me to use to take an exam with. So I built out that first set of practice exams for Security Plus. That was the very first set. And it was about a year ago. Hasn't been that long, really. Year and a half. And then I did both A+. And people at that point were like, okay, let's get some practice exams for Network Plus. Here we go. Except now Network Plus is being retired next year about this time, just after. In about a year and a few months. And the next Network Plus is coming out at the end of this year. Well, we're finishing up Security Plus. By the time I finish Security Plus, the new Network Plus will be updated. It'll be time to start that. So by the time I'm done with this practice exam book for Security Plus, I'm already rolling into Network Plus. That's the time I'm going to be building out this practice exams for Network Plus, is for the N10-008. So there is, I won't say it's impossible for you to ever see an N10-007 practice exams book, but it's effectively impossible that you would ever see an N10-007 practice exams book. There's just no plans. There's not enough time for me to make one. So it takes months to write these books. I've never made the Network Plus practice exams book, so the entire thing has to be written from scratch right now. So that takes months of time. By the time I wrote and got that book out, the N10-007 will be retired. So that's why you don't see one. It's just about timing. It takes so many months to write one of those books. So that's the real idea. And what you would find. I think that's where the N10-008 practice exams book for Network Plus is absolutely going to happen. That is a big thing I want to get done. So there will be a practice exams book into this year, beginning of next, somewhere in there. Hopefully, if all things go well, that timing will work. But that's for the N10-008. Sorry. Didn't quite happen that way. Didn't quite work out for Network Plus, but it was just about timing. I did not realize how popular those books would be, which is a great problem to have. But the problem is that I never got to Network Plus fast enough to be able to make one. So that's what that's about. And Bob, you have that question about artifacting. I saw this earlier. Sorry for missing that. Can integrated GPUs overheat and cause artifacting? Well, sure. And just as a external GPU, a GPU in general, overheating can do all kinds of crazy things. It can make the screen go black. It can make the screen go white. It can make your mouse ghost on the screen. It can, with trails, mouse trails, it can cause artifacting. It could cause it to go fuzzy. It could do anything because it's overheating. It's all at that point, who knows what's going to happen if it's overheating. Certainly can cause problems. And to be clear, an artifact is when you get like a block of something on the screen. If you've ever had a bad HDMI cable and you get blockiness on the screen, you see these blocks, these blobby blocks show up on the screen, or a weird graphical character shows up on the screen, that's an artifact. So yeah, you can have artifacts. You wiggle the cable of your video, you'll get artifacts. That just because you've got some signal loss there. And digitally, it can't put the digital signal back together, so you end up seeing blocky, artifacty things happening. That's what an artifact is. You would not get an artifact if your backlight goes out. Yeah, that's not an artifact. That's the backlight going out. The screen, everything on the screen looks okay. It's just dark. That's an artifact. If it's blocky, it's an artifact. That's the real key. So can integrated GPUs have identical problems as external GPUs? Sure. Of course. I don't think you tend to see the GPU metrics in Task Manager because it's not a process. It's a piece of hardware. But there's probably, if you want to see what's the temperature of my GPU, there's probably multiple sensors on your GPU, both the one that's inside your system and if it's in your system, it may be even in your CPU. So you've certainly got some metrics there and temperature controls to pull from. And certainly there's probably sensors on the existing standalone external adapter card GPUs as well that you could pull from. But usually you get those from the manufacturer's software for the card, and it can pull and query those. Sometimes you can find third-party software that can do that as well. But it will show you what's the temperature on that card. What is it? How's it processing? Is it working okay? You can get those as well, but not usually in Task Manager. Usually it's in the video card software, management software for those. But it can have, you seem to be going somewhere with this. I have a feeling you got your hands on a bad practice exam question, which is where whenever I get a question about artifacting or video, it's always somebody who got a bad practice exam question. And although I wish I could go through every bad practice exam question that is sent to me, parse all of them out, and explain why I think this question was a bad question, where I thought the author was going with this particular question, and why the potential available answers don't really apply, would take me forever because I get tons of these messages every day. So I apologize in advance for those of you that send me these things and you get a response from me that says, looks like a bad question to me. I would recommend you take this back to the author of the question and ask them why it's such a bad question. Because I just can't, there's just not enough time in the day. And I'm getting the same ones all the time that I can't possibly go through every single one of these to write down my understanding of why this is a bad question. I write my own bad questions. I spend all my time explaining my own bad questions like we did today. Hopefully there aren't very many of those. So that's why whenever you get those from me and I'm telling you kind of, it sounds flippant, like go ask the person who wrote it, because I just can't, there's just no way. I just don't have enough time in the day to parse this whole thing out. And I'll tell you, it looks like a bad question to me. Go ask them what they were talking about. And sometimes people do go back to the original author who doubles down and they say, this isn't a bad question. This is a good question. And they come back to me and say, the author said it was a good question. And I get to say, well, the author's wrong. It's a bad question. Because I think sometimes there's a disconnect with people who write practice questions who haven't done this before and people who've been in the industry and actually work with these technologies that you would only understand had you done it. I think there's some of these topics are like that. Some are not, but some are. So that's why I always send them back to the author. But I do say, yeah, I think it's a bad question. I just can't go much further than that. Have I ever gotten ransomware and did my power supply ever catch on fire? Let me think about this. I have certainly had components within a computer catch on fire, smoke. Usually a capacitor goes bad. But not like a fire situation. Not like grab an extinguisher and put out the web server. Never had that happen. And most PSUs or most components inside of a system are not going to catch on fire unless it's some major issue with the hardware. That's never happened to any large extent. And I've never gotten ransomware, thankfully. I'm always preparing for ransomware. I'm always waiting for ransomware. We should all be preparing for ransomware and knowing what we're going to do to recover from this ransomware when it happens. And that, of course, is another important part. I have offline backups so that once I make the backup, it's stored offline. And if something does happen to my machine, I delete everything and restore from backup. That is, by the way, how you restore from ransomware. You delete everything, you restore from backup. That's it. There's no getting around that one. That's probably what they spent all weekend doing at the pipeline, is deleting everything and restoring from a known good backup. So that's the real key. The question from Carmen is my bundle package for Security Plus. This would be my Success Bundle. A full course to prep to take the Security Plus exam. Well, it's everything I make. The only thing I don't do is write a book. So if you need a Security Plus book, you'd go somewhere else for that. But when you need a video course, you need course notes, you need practice exams, you need the exam hacks, You would like priority access to the study group. You would like downloadable study group versions. You would like, all those downloadable things to go along with it. That's what the package is for. And for many people, it is, grab a book and you're done. You got everything you need. I don't know what other places offer, so it's hard to compare. But I try to list everything. Well, I do list everything on the product information page that comes with the bundle so that you can see, it comes with this, it comes with this, it comes with this, it comes with that, it comes with the other. So you can see everything that's there. And I try to go just piece by piece so you can really see everything visually. And I write detailed explanation for everything else that's there as well. And you can, of course, send me a note if you have questions about that. I'm more than happy to answer. What school do I recommend, or any formal school, to obtain Security Plus cert? Now, I don't have any specific schools I recommend or even know about. Most of the time, a Security Plus certification class, the only thing I can tell you there is I don't recommend anybody who's going to a 1 or 2 week boot camp, of which there are no boots. The boot camp idea of going into a week or 2 weeks of training and being able to learn everything you need to learn to earn a Security Plus certification is physically impossible. It defies laws of physics. There's no way to do that. There's no way you could learn everything in a week or two to pass your Security Plus exam unless you already had some knowledge in the industry. And if that's the case, you don't need to go and take a boot camp. See how that works? So that's why I don't have any that I recommend. But if you do want to go to a formal class, I always watch or recommend that you take one over a number of weeks. A lot of community colleges turn out to do a much better job of certification courses than four-year universities. I still don't know why that. Well, I do know why that is. I think I know why that is, but that's what's happening, at least in the United States, is community colleges do a much better job of prepping you for a certification, generally, broadly speaking, than four-year universities tend to do. So that's why if you really, really, really want to take a class, go to a community college, find their Security Plus course and go through it that way. Same thing for CCNA, same thing for Network Plus, A Plus. There are some commercial training places that do this as well. They tend to be more expensive, but there's some options there as well in the industry. But that's probably my best recommendation. Just stay away from the boot camp idea, assuming it's a 1 to 2 week boot camp. I have seen some places advertise themselves as boot camps, but it's a 3-month boot camp. Okay, it's not boot camp, but they're sort of using the boot camp term as a marketing tool. That's great. If it's a 3-month boot camp, I'm on board with that. If it's a 2-week boot camp, no, does not work that way. So that's the idea, is go to the community colleges, go to the places that have done this, that specialize in giving you a security or a certification class. And I think that's where you should go with that. That's my best recommendation. Stay away from the bad stuff and go to the good stuff. That was easy. It's kind of an overview of training. There's things that go outside that scope, though. You may find a 4-year school that has a good Security Plus program. They're out there. There's not a lot, but you may find a little bit of just a diamond in that rough occasionally. You'll have to really do some research on that to really find the right one. Have a look in your area. There's some good online courses as well, and a lot of courses like mine that are just you go at your own pace and do it yourself. There's a lot of people doing that too. So it's up to whatever makes sense for you. Everybody learns a different way. Find the way that works for you and go with it. It doesn't matter what everybody else is doing. Find the one that works for you. That's all that matters when you're the one trying to learn this. Well, I think that's a pretty good place to finish things up. We talked for quite a bit about all kinds of different things today. It's a little bit different in the after show, but that's the way it goes sometimes. And we're more than happy to hang out with you and talk about my enormously sized mouse. Didn't know where I was going there. And really talk about technology in general, which I like to do anyway. I could just do it all day and discuss whatever happens to be top of mind. We love having you here. We're so glad you joined us for the study group. Feel free to come back next week. We do the Security Plus study group Wednesday next week, a week from today. I haven't even written it yet, so I don't even know what's going to be. But we'll have Security Plus questions for you. We'll do the after show. We'll go through all of these things. It's always a lot of fun, and we'd love to have you here. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on the Network Plus Study Group. Thanks, everyone.